Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. The case of Elizabeth Liz Sullivan. Elizabeth Liz Sullivan is a very complex individual. She is very energetic, cheerful, and intelligent. However, she has her own problems. She has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which means she can sometimes act impulsively, feel anxious, or show excessive enthusiasm. In 2010, Elizabeth met Matthew Sullivan, a Navy sailor from Minnesota. She felt she had found someone who could provide her with stability and opportunity. Just a few months after meeting, they were engaged and moved together to San Diego, California, where Matthew was stationed. When Elizabeth was pregnant, her husband had to go on a business trip abroad. Alone in a new city, she gave birth to their first daughter. They later had another daughter, while Matthew continued to endure time away from home. Elizabeth raised 2 young children alone and made a new friend, Nathan Carrichter. When Matthew returned home, the family settled in Liberty Station, but problems began to appear in their marriage. Elizabeth, who was accustomed to doing everything her own way, found it difficult to adjust to her husband's return. Besides, they faced the pressure of caring for 2 small children. In the midst of a strained relationship, Elizabeth joined Tinder and began secretly dating Stephen Sutton. Elizabeth often spent time with Stephen and his roommate, but the roommate's girlfriend did not like her and reported her to Child Protective Services. The woman suspected that Elizabeth might have left her child home alone while visiting Stephen. CPS investigated, but found no evidence of wrongdoing. However, they informed Elizabeth that they would have to report the incident to Matthew, which made her anxious about her secret relationship being discovered. That evening, Elizabeth confessed to Matthew about her relationship with Stephen. Although Matthew seemed calm upon hearing this and appeared to accept that they were both living separate lives, the messages exchanged between him and Stephen suggested a different reality. Matthew appeared to mock Stephen in these messages, clearly expressing discontent and conflict. Elizabeth was last seen on October 13, 2014, near Liberty Station in San Diego, where she lived with her family. That night, she felt extreme anxiety as she called her close friend Calandra Duckett while arguing with her husband Matthew. During the call, she shared that Matthew was threatening to kill her. After their conversation ended, Calandra waited for another call from Elizabeth, but when that didn't happen, Calandra reported Elizabeth missing on October 14th. Friends and family began searching for Elizabeth. Her father flew to San Diego from his home in Virginia to help find his daughter. Her family did not believe that she would leave without informing anyone. They feared that something had happened to her. Investigators looked into both Matthew and Stephen, the 2 men involved in Elizabeth's life at the time of her disappearance. Matthew was very cooperative with the police investigation. He agreed to let them search his home and even underwent a lie detector test with good results. Conversely, Stephen quickly hired a lawyer and refused to cooperate with police. While his refusal to work with them may have hindered the investigation, Stephen was ultimately cleared of wrongdoing. Investigators also considered the possibility that Elizabeth may have decided to leave her current life to start anew, as Matthew had suggested. They discovered a journal, in which Elizabeth wrote about a fictional character with many similarities to herself, who left her family to seek a new beginning. Furthermore, her transfer of about $1,000 from her joint bank account with her husband to her personal account just before her disappearance raised further suspicions that she may have voluntarily left. However, authorities did not rule out the grim possibility that Elizabeth may have ended her life, as she was known to have engaged in self-harm to alleviate the psychological pain she endured. Although the San Diego police searched for Elizabeth for 2 years, all efforts yielded no results. As time passed, the case gradually went cold, while her family continuously pleaded for her safe return. But nearly 2 years after her disappearance, on October 6, 2016, a horrifying breakthrough occurred. On that day, Elizabeth's body was found floating in San Diego Bay, near her home. Notably, this was the same day that Matthew moved from San Diego to the East Coast with his new girlfriend. Due to the body being in the process of decomposition, investigators needed another week to determine Elizabeth's identity. After that, it took an additional 1.5 years for the police to link Matthew to her death. The autopsy indicated that she had been stabbed with a sharp object, causing damage to her bones and a fractured jaw. Although the medical examination concluded that she might have been killed just a month prior, investigators noted that the decomposition process could have been slowed if her body had been stored in a freezer. Therefore, investigators believed that Matthew had hidden Elizabeth's body somewhere before discarding it in the bay. When Matthew left the house, detectives conducted a thorough search. Using luminol, they found traces of blood in the main bathroom and large bloodstains in the bedroom, on the carpet and wooden floor, even though the carpet had been cleaned. They also discovered that on the day Elizabeth went missing, she had met with a divorce attorney and paid the fees using Matthew's credit card. In a strange call to 911 that day, Matthew expressed concern that his wife was trying to evict him from their home and take their child from him. He complained that she had used his credit card to hire a lawyer against him. Despite the evidence, prosecutors felt it was insufficient to charge Matthew. As a result, they decided to re-examine the house, this time tearing down the insulation in the attic. There, they discovered a military-style folding knife that had been well hidden. Analysis revealed Elizabeth's blood on the blade and a mixture of both Elizabeth's and Matthew's DNA on the handle, further raising suspicions about Matthew's involvement in his wife's death. With all this new evidence, Matthew Sullivan was arrested outside his home in Wyoming, Delaware, on January 31, 2018. He was extradited to San Diego and eventually detained at the George Bailey Detention Facility in early February. Prosecutors suspect he killed his wife when he discovered she was planning to leave him, then hid her body in a freezer for nearly 2 years before dumping it in the water the day he was leaving San Diego. The important trials began a year later, with the preliminary hearing taking place in February 2019. When information about Elizabeth's disappearance and death was made public, the judge decided that Matthew must stand trial for murder. The official trial commenced on February 21, 2020. Deputy District Attorney Jill Lindbergh stated that their relationship initially started with love, but quickly turned into domestic violence, leading to Elizabeth's death. She emphasized that Matthew had the motive, sufficient means, and opportunity to commit this act. The crime scene is Elizabeth's bedroom, where the weapon used in the crime was found in the attic. Matthew's attorney, Marcus Dubose, argued that their marriage had deteriorated since 2012. He described Matthew as a husband trying to take care of his wife, but she was distant and pursued a self-destructive lifestyle. Marcus argued that blood in Elizabeth's bedroom was self-inflicted during periods of stress in their marriage. The defense contended that the knife found in the attic could have been hidden there by Elizabeth. They emphasized to the jury that the prosecution's theory about Elizabeth's body being hidden in the freezer was merely speculation, without clear evidence. They also noted that Matthew had no prior convictions and had served in the Navy for 8 years. After a day and a half of deliberation, the jury found Matthew Sullivan guilty of second-degree murder. The judge ultimately sentenced Matthew to life in prison, but he could be eligible for parole after 16 years. From behind bars, he continues to assert that he did not kill his wife. However, for Elizabeth's friends and family, the verdict finally brought closure. Justice had been served for Elizabeth, and her husband could not escape the consequences. Case 2. The case of Bridget Frisbee. Bridget Frisbee was born in December 1993 in Katy, Texas, USA. Shortly after her birth, her parents abandoned her, and she was placed in an orphanage. When Bridget was 18 months old, Robert Frisbee and Catherine visited the orphanage. After years of trying without being able to have children, they decided to make happy the baby abandoned by her parents. Catherine had always longed for a daughter, and from the moment she first met Bridget, she felt a deep connection. Without hesitation, Robert and Catherine decided to adopt Bridget. From then on, they provided Bridget with a family full of love and protection. Bridget was an active and kind-hearted child. From a young age, she developed a passion for horseback riding, poetry, and painting. Her positive and friendly nature helped her make many friends. Her adoptive parents often wondered how her biological parents could have abandoned such a wonderful child. However, despite her cheerful demeanor, Bridget faced significant challenges throughout her life. When Bridget was 10 years old, her adoptive mother passed away after battling a long-term illness for several years, despite always being cared for and encouraged by family. Catherine's death was a devastating loss for Bridget, who had seen Catherine as her real mother. During this difficult period, father and daughter grew closer, supporting each other as they navigated their grief. Robert deeply loved his daughter, and over the years, they built a warm and trusting relationship. As Bridget grew older, her rebellious nature became more and more evident. Robert struggled to keep up with her boundless energy, but she continued to embrace life with enthusiasm. Despite their differences, they maintained a close and loving relationship. Bridget was an active and lively student. She excelled academically and had ambitious dreams for the future, much to her father's delight. She aspired to attend college and build an independent life. On April 3, 2011, a group of teenagers were riding motorcycles along the edge of a Texas forest. This was a strip of land planted near the family's home. The area was usually used for riding dirt bikes and ATVs. Towards the end of the trip, the young athletes saw something suspicious off to the side of the trail. Venturing slightly into the woods, they made a horrifying discovery: a human body. Realizing the importance of preserving evidence, the group refrained from disturbing the scene. They observed blood on the girl's clothes and head, and it appeared that someone had attempted to hide the body by covering it with branches and leaves. However, the concealment was so poorly done that the body was visible even from a considerable distance. The police were immediately called to the scene, where the high school students waited for their arrival. None of the teens recognized the girl. The officers discovered that the victim had no identification, making it impossible to determine her identity at the time. During a cursory inspection of the area, the detectives assumed that the massacre had been carried out right there. The victim had been attacked and left in the forest. A forensic examination later confirmed that there were no signs of abuse violence, and all of her belongings, including valuables, were still with her. This ruled out robbery and abuse assault as motives, so they suspect that the attack was related to personal hostility or jealousy. The police immediately investigated the victim's identity. They noticed the victim appeared to be just under 20 years old. She was found lying on the ground, partially covered with branches and dirt. A large wound to the head was the only visible injury, indicating a fatal blow that killed the young schoolgirl on the spot. The wound was caused by a 9mm bullet at close range, which passed through her head. Near the body, investigators discovered an empty 9mm ammunition box. This was the only clue with which the detectives had to start searching for the culprit of the tragedy. While examining the crime scene, investigators noticed another peculiar detail. A few meters from the body, a small patch of the forest floor had its top layer of soil removed, leaving a bare spot. It appeared as though someone had started digging, but stopped abruptly. The reason for this was unclear. It was possible the killer had intended to bury the body, but was interrupted or frightened away. However, the police acknowledged that this detail might have been unrelated to the girl's murder. To identify the deceased, investigators began reaching out to local residents. They went door to door, speaking with people who lived near the forest. News of the brutal murder quickly spread through the community, causing widespread concern. The police used the media to inform the public about the incident, which had occurred just a few hundred meters from some homes, leaving families horrified. Such a crime was unprecedented in their peaceful area. Residents were asked if they had noticed any suspicious vehicles or unfamiliar individuals heading toward the forest or behaving strangely. Meanwhile, deputies from the sheriff's department visited dozens of homes and interviewed numerous witnesses. However, no valuable information emerged on the first day of the investigation. Just as the officers were beginning to lose hope of finding a helpful lead, a woman from a nearby settlement provided a significant clue. She explained that the night before the body was found, she had been relaxing with friends in her backyard. Between 2 and 3 a.m., she heard a loud noise resembling an explosion. Her friends also confirmed hearing the same sound. According to the witnesses' recollections that night, no one attached much importance to this extraneous noise, since she lived next to a forest area and knew that it could have been hunters. Moreover, the noise seemed distant, and she wasn't even sure if it was a bullet sound. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, no additional information surfaced. The police returned to the station and began searching their database to determine if the murdered woman was listed as missing. Given the circumstances, it was likely her details had been added only a few days earlier. Unfortunately, during these checks, officers were unable to identify the victim found in the forest. The case took a turn the next day. On the morning of April 4, 2011, Robert Frisbee went to the sheriff's department to report that he hadn't been able to contact his 17-year-old daughter, Bridget, for over a day. He was deeply concerned, especially after hearing about a body discovered in the nearby forest, not far from their home. At this time, the identity of the body remained unknown, so detectives immediately communicated with Robert. He revealed that he had been unable to reach his adopted daughter, Bridget, through her mobile phone or social media since the previous evening. Bridget had planned to spend the night at a friend's house 2 days before Robert reported her missing to the police. Robert believed she was mature enough to make such plans and assumed she had intended to meet her boyfriend that night. He didn't object to her having fun. However, after leaving home, Bridget failed to contact her father. She didn't confirm her arrival, let him know how she was, or even say goodnight. This lack of communication was unusual, as their family shared a warm and trusting relationship. According to Robert, such behavior seemed uncharacteristic and caused concern. Robert was aware of an unwritten rule often followed by the police. They are unlikely to act on a disappearance reported earlier than 24 hours after the person goes missing. With this in mind, he decided to wait before going to the police station. During this time, he repeatedly tried contacting his daughter on her mobile phone and reaching out to her friends, but all his efforts were met with silence, without any clue. When Robert provided detectives with a description of his daughter, they immediately noted Bridget's striking resemblance to the body they had found. Robert was shown photographs from the scene of the incident and heartbreakingly confirmed that it was Bridget. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she left home. The discovery was an emotional devastation for Robert. Years earlier, he had lost his wife to a serious illness and still deeply missed her. His daughter had been his source of hope and joy, but now that light was gone too. With this confirmation, the victim was officially identified. The police then questioned Robert to piece together the events. Robert said that he last saw his daughter on April 2nd, 2011, when she was still at home. He had just bought her a pair of soft blue leggings, which she tried on before going out for a walk. That evening, Bridget's friend Kendall Suwa came over for dinner with the family. After the meal, the two girls asked Robert to take them to a party. He agreed, but when they arrived, they discovered that the club was closed to young people. Unable to attend, Robert took the two girls home at around 10 p.m. Kendall left shortly after, picked up by another young man who planned to return home by midnight. Bridget and Kendall had planned to go to the bus stop to meet Bridget's boyfriend. However, Robert did not wait for the young man to arrive and went to bed. He set his alarm for midnight, and when he woke up, he found Bridget still at home. She told him that her friend was late, which worried her. Robert reassured his daughter and told her to go to bed. After seeing Bridget start getting ready for bed, he locked the door and went back to sleep. At around 3 a.m., Robert woke up feeling uneasy. He checked around the house and realized that Bridget was not there. Thinking she might have gone out with friends, he left the garage door unlocked so she could get inside without waking him. When he tried to call her to ask when she would be home, he realized that he couldn't find his phone. He thought that his daughter might have taken his mobile phone so as not to leave home without a means of communication. He tried using the internet and social media to contact her, but she didn't respond to his calls or messages. Concerned, Robert attempted to track his phone's location through GPS to ensure his daughter was safe, but he couldn't manage to do so. His anxiety grew as he realized she was unlikely to stick to her curfew. He decided to wait until morning, hoping she would return and resolve the situation on her own. Unfortunately, when he woke up on next day, Bridget was still not home. Robert began calling several of her friends and contacts, but no one could tell him exactly where she was or what had happened. By that evening, he read online that a group of teenagers on motorcycles had discovered the body of an unidentified girl near his family home. This news made Robert even more anxious. Although he tried to push away the distressing thoughts, the possibility that his daughter might be the victim tormented him. The next morning, he went to the police station and confirmed that the murdered girl was indeed his daughter. The devastating news left him shattered. He became unable to sleep or focus on work, and even started keeping a loaded weapon by his bedside. After Robert's testimony, the detectives finally had their first lead. The suspect was Kendall So, a school friend of Bridget's, with whom she had spoken on the evening before her disappearance. Bridget's father stated that he had known Kendall for a long time and had never observed any signs of aggression or dangerous behavior in him. According to Robert, Kendall was a responsible high school student with no history of criminal activity or bad influences. He was well behaved, a good student, and always treated Bridget with respect. Her father felt confident trusting his daughter with Kendall, believing she was safe in his company. Robert was certain that Kendall could not be the killer. In contrast, Robert believed that a more likely suspect was Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Valley Jonathan Eason. From the start, Bridget and Jonathan had a troubled relationship. Jonathan was a bad influence and was suspected of using soft banned substance. He was frequently involved in problematic incidents and had a history of provoking conflicts. From the beginning of their acquaintance, he often displayed threatening behavior. Later, a third person came into the picture, Zach Richards, another old friend of Bridget's, with whom she had started dating shortly before her death. Based on Robert's testimony, investigators quickly identified several suspects who needed to be thoroughly investigated. Detectives immediately began questioning these young men to determine their whereabouts at the time of the murder. The first person they approached was Kendall, one of the last people to see Bridget alive. Kendall had no prior issues with the law. When contacted by the police, he willingly agreed to come to the station and provide his statement. He confirmed Robert's account, explaining how he visited Bridget's house and then went to the club with Bridget. According to Kendall, he left the house shortly after Robert dropped them off at the club. He claimed that their plans had suddenly changed because another friend was to join them. Kendall expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation and agreed to provide DNA samples and fingerprints as needed. He also mentioned that on the evening in question, Bridget was upset due to a recent argument with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Eason. Bridget and Jonathan had been in a relationship for several months, but it had been troubled from the start. Jonathan often accused her of cheating, which eventually led to their breakup. However, he seemed to hold a grudge against her and would use any chance to hurt her feelings. The situation was further complicated because they attended the same class. The police verified Kendall's alibi, which checked out. Despite this, they kept him on the list of suspects and decided to scrutinize some of his statements further. The next person the detectives investigated was Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Several witnesses from Bridget's close circle had mentioned him during their interviews. When the police attempted to contact Jonathan, they couldn't reach him. They decided to visit his home, but upon arrival, they found the house empty, with signs suggesting it had been abandoned in a hurry. This discovery raised serious concerns. The back wall of the family home was covered with round holes resembling bullet holes. Based on the number of holes, investigators concluded that the bullet holes were either from a semi-automatic weapon, or the attacker has been deliberately impacting the front of the house for a long time. During their investigation, they discovered that about a week before Bridget's murder, Jonathan had been targeted by 3 unknown individuals in a car. They had opened attack on him, but he managed to hide in his room, avoiding injury. Following the attack, Jonathan reported the incident to the police. Despite the investigators' best efforts, the case remained unsolved. The only evidence collected at the scene were spent cartridges and several bullets. Neighbors revealed that Jonathan moved out the day after the attack, fearing for his safety. The police suspected that these events might be connected. On March 14th, the active phase of the search for Jonathan began. He became the main suspect in this case. By that time, detectives had already managed to visit the school where he studied. Bridget also studied there. The administration reported that Jonathan had not been in class in recent days. Investigators decided to talk to other students from his class. Police officers tried to find out where Jonathan went after the attack. Detectives met Alexander Olivieri, who introduced himself as a close friend of Bridget. According to him, they had recently met, and since then, they often communicated. Alexander immediately said that during her relationship with Jonathan, Bridget repeatedly feared for her life and health, as Jonathan behaved aggressively. Even after their breakup, Jonathan continued to pursue her. They often saw each other at school, and Jonathan did not miss the opportunity to offend her. All this often ended in quarrels and confrontations. Bridget just wanted to forget about the relationship and the unpleasant breakup, but her ex-boyfriend prevented this with all his might. According to Alexander, Jonathan was capable of causing harm to Bridget. Investigators tried to find out where Alexander was on the night of Bridget's murder. According to him, he was supposed to meet her that very night. They were going to pick up her boyfriend, Zach Richards, from the bus station. Zach was returning from visiting relatives who lived in a neighboring state. Alexander claimed that he arrived late to Bridget's house with another friend named Alan Perez. Bridget had promised to wait for them near the house, but he did not see her anywhere. She ignored their calls, so they left, assuming she had either already gone to bed. They met Zach and drove around the city for several hours before returning home at around 5 a.m. According to the forensic expert, by that time, Bridget had already been killed. Alexander learned of Bridget's death from the news. Detectives then questioned Alan, who told a similar story. However, his version slightly differed. He claimed that after meeting Zach, they played computer games all night and did not drive around the city. These discrepancies raised suspicions. Detectives added Alexander and Alan to the list of suspects as their stories did not align, and no one could confirm their alibis. Nevertheless, Jonathan remained the main witness investigators wanted to question. Detectives quickly discovered that Jonathan's mother had not left the city after the attack on their home. Instead, she had moved in with a family friend for a while her son was sent to relatives in Austin, Texas. Law enforcement officers quickly found Jonathan's mother, who admitted that her son often got into trouble because of his bad character. She confirmed that the attack on the house was clearly directed against him, as the bullets were aimed at the side of the house where his room was. According to her, Jonathan had gotten into a fight before the attack, so the attackers were most likely connected to this incident. Unfortunately, it was not possible to prove this during the investigation. The relationship between Jonathan and his mother was far from ideal. Despite sending him to Austin, she did not keep in touch with him and did not know his exact whereabouts. However, she provided the police with an address to help them begin their search for Jonathan. Help for the investigation came from an unexpected source. Alan's lawyer approached the police and stated that his client had important information regarding the case. Alan was willing to provide this information in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Detectives considered the information potentially useful and agreed to the terms. According to Alan, there was a direct connection between Bridget's murder and the drive-by attack at Jonathan's house. Alan revealed that both he and Alexander had joined the National Guard, where they learned how to handle weapons. After mastering basic skills, Alexander continued his education at school and met Bridget. Bridget confided in Alexander about her problems with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Together, they came up with a solution. According to Alan, in the incident that happened at Jonathan's house, it was Bridget who directly acted. Alex used his semi-automatic weapon, while Alan was also present in the car, but only as an observer. Unfortunately for the entire group, Bridget started talking too much, putting everyone at risk of being exposed. On April 2nd, 2011, Alexander planned to meet Bridget to confront her about how her loose talk had nearly jeopardized them all. Considering his training in the National Guard and aspirations for a career in the military, Alexander feared Bridget's behavior could ruin his future. Meanwhile, Jonathan had already reported the situation to the police, and an active investigation was underway. Before that, after completing his training, Alexander began carrying a 9mm Beretta in a holster under his clothes. That evening, Alexander and Alan went to pick up Bridget from her house. They convinced her to get into the car by pretending they were to pick up her boyfriend Zach from the bus station. Initially, Bridget refused to go, so Alexander followed her into the house, determined to get her into the car by any necessary. While this was happening, Alan hid in the back seat of the Chevrolet Suburban under a large blanket. Eventually, Alexander managed to persuade Bridget to get into the car. They drove to an isolated area. On the way, Alexander started to put pressure on Bridget and accused her of the fact that her chatter could cost them all dearly. Upon arriving at the secluded location, they walked to a nearby wooded area. Alexander brought a shovel and flashlight and, together with Bridget, entered the forest. After some time, Alan got out of the car and quietly followed them, staying far enough behind to avoid being seen by Bridget. According to Alan, Alexander forced Bridget to dig, intimidating her and insisting it was urgent. While they were digging, Alexander suddenly pulled out a weapon and aimed it at the back of Bridget's head. Alan initially thought Alexander was trying to scare Bridget as a way of teaching her a lesson, but to his shock, Alexander pulled the trigger, killing her instantly. After the murder, Alexander hurried back to the car, taking the shovel and flashlight with him. He destroyed Bridget's phone and discarded the weapon, likely somewhere in the forest. Alan was stunned and confronted Alexander, angrily accusing him of what he had done. However, Alexander threatened Alan, warning him to stay silent or face consequences. Alexander then took all the items involved in the murder back to his home. Later, around 4 a.m., they picked up Bridget's boyfriend, Zach, from the bus station as originally planned. That night, Alexander invited a third friend to spend the night at his place. The following day, Alexander convinced Alan to work together to create a shared alibi. They agreed to stick to their story when speaking with the police. Alexander believed this plan would deceive the detectives. To further mislead the investigation, he decided to shift suspicion onto Bridget's argumentative ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Alan admitted that he and Alexander had willingly participated in an attack at Jonathan's house to help Bridget. However, Alexander hadn't anticipated that Bridget would telling others about the incident. According to Alan's confession, Alexander saw no other solution than to kill Bridget to protect his future. Later, investigators questioned Zach, Bridget's boyfriend. Zach confessed that he had known about the attack at Jonathan's house. He also confirmed that Bridget had started sharing the story with others. Bridget had even considered posting about it on social media to intimidate Jonathan, which enraged Alexander. He repeatedly begged Bridget to drop these plans, but she refused to listen. On the evening of the meeting, Zach knew Bridget was supposed to arrive with 2 friends, but when the car arrived, she wasn't in it. When asked about Bridget's whereabouts, Alexander said he couldn't reach her. A few days later, Zach learned of Bridget's death. Alexander Olivieri was immediately arrested, and during a search of his home, police were unable to find the weapon believed to have been used in the car attack, as well as the weapon used to kill Bridget. However, they did find instructions for a weapon model that matched the shell casings discovered at the crime scene. Investigators also recovered a shovel that Bridget had used to dig a hole in the forest before being shot. Her DNA was confirmed to be on it. A thorough inspection of Alexander's car revealed numerous fabric fibers. However, Alexander never admitted to his actions. Instead, he attempted to shift the blame onto Alan. At this time, the prosecutor's office presented strong evidence disproving his claims. During the investigation, video recordings from 2010 were uncovered, showing Alexander demonstrating his weapon skills with the same type of weapon used to kill Bridget and in the attack at Jonathan's house. FBI agents took an active part in the investigation. A few days before the trial, they presented the results of fiber analysis conducted on materials collected from Alexander's car. The fibers matched the artificial fur on the victim's clothing. Bridget had been wearing a bright and distinctive outfit, making it easy to trace the source of the fibers. Additional evidence has strengthened the case against Alexander. Alexander's lawyer advised him to remain composed during the trial. He chose not to testify and never confessed to the murder. His cold demeanor made him appear calculating and unfeeling. On August 1, 2012, Alexander was found guilty and sentenced to 60 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Bridget's father deemed the sentence fair and expressed hope that Alexander would never be released. As promised by the police, Alan was not prosecuted for any of the incidents described. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kat Torres. Kat Torres is a social media sensation, attracting millions of fans who follow her lavish lifestyle. While many admire her, others are jealous of her success. However, few people know the difficult reality she faced. Born on October 24, 1989, in northern Brazil, Kat grew up in a poor neighborhood and came from a troubled family. Her father struggled with alcoholism. At the age of 14, Kat submitted her resume to a modeling agency. She quickly caught the attention of the agency and was invited to do photo shoots. After receiving her first payment, she happily moved out of her parents' house. Kat was offered the opportunity to move to Europe, which she accepted. Her career took off, and she began appearing on magazine covers more frequently. Eventually, Kat moved to the United States, where she attended parties with celebrities. In December 2013, Kat moved to New York, where she could see the Statue of Liberty. Her neighbors noticed her wearing designer clothes and carrying expensive handbags and jewelry, leading them to believe that she was dating a wealthy man. Her friends learned that she was dating a Russian oligarch who rented her a luxury apartment and provided for her every need. Kat did not reveal his name at first. However, she showed a photo of him to a close friend, who described him as an older man and mentioned that no one had ever met him in person. Although she had a number of admirers, things changed when she encountered health problems. She had to have her breast implants removed, which led to a difficult and lengthy recovery. As a result, she became less attractive to men, and the Russian tycoon stopped contacting her. Kat tried to revive her modeling career and pursue an acting career, but both attempts were unsuccessful. Kat then became famous on social media by creating her own brand and teaching her followers about healthy living, love, financial success, and achieving their dreams. She regularly shares beautiful photos, inspirational quotes, and useful advice on her page. With millions of followers, Kat enjoys a vibrant lifestyle and travels frequently. During this time, she began a relationship with a young businessman named Ben, who supported her in building her brand. Kat also wrote and published an inspirational book called Voice. In this book, she addresses issues of violence and abuse, shares her journey from poverty to success, and explains how she made her dreams come true. In 2017, Kat Torres began offering private sessions to clients. She inspires young women, provides guidance, teaches them about spirituality, and encourages self-care. One of Kat's clients, Anna, shared that she found Kat during a time of distress when she was in an abusive relationship. Anna had a difficult childhood and many health problems. She lost a lot of weight and felt hopeless. Anna thought her life was over until she found Kat. Anna aspired to study in Boston, Massachusetts, but Kat convinced her to move to New York and become her housekeeper. Kat informed Anna that part of her responsibilities would be to take care of Kat's cats. Kat promised to pay Anna $2,000 a month, so Anna agreed to move to New York. However, when Anna arrived at Kat's apartment, she was shocked by the mess. There was trash everywhere, dirty clothes strewn about, and the cats had peed on the bed. Kat struggled to make ends meet and did not know how to take of the apartment. The lights were always on, and Kat hardly ever slept. She couldn't stand the silence. Even in the shower, she would call Anna to talk. Anna could only sleep when Kat was out meeting men. When Kat came home late at night or early in the morning, she would wake Anna up immediately. Kat also tried to prevent Anna from communicating with anyone, even on the phone. Anna worked almost non-stop in Kat's apartment, but Kat never paid her the promised $2,000. Eventually, Anna realized she was being used and that Kat was manipulating her. She felt scared and kept thinking about how to expose Kat, but she hesitated. She believed she was Kat's first victim. Eventually, Anna found a way to escape by moving in with a new boyfriend. In mid-2022, Kat moved to Texas with her new boyfriend Zach, who was 21. They rented a large 5-bedroom house, but after a few months, they were evicted for not paying rent. Neighbors witnessed Kat and Zach moving boxes filled with dolls and dried herbs out of the house. Kat purchased these items in bulk and sold them through her social media accounts. At the time, she claimed to her followers that she could cure various illnesses through magic, and increased her consultation fees. During online meetings, Kat told clients that she could communicate with God. For many clients, she claimed to connect with their ancestors. Sometimes, a few days after a consultation, she would call clients to share their dreams. Kat claimed that those who followed her guidance found success and happiness, while those who doubted her faced serious consequences. Kat and Zach then moved to Austin, where they rented a spacious new home. Meanwhile, Kat began actively looking for a new assistant. One day Kat called her Brazilian client, Desiree Freitas, in tears. Kat said she was feeling worse, her health was failing, and she feared she didn't have much time left. Kat asked Desiree to come to Austin, wanting her to be close by. They talked on the phone for 2 hours, and Desiree finally agreed to Kat's request. That same day, Kat bought tickets, and Desiree flew to Austin. Kat then announced on social media that she was starting her own witch coven. She also convinced 2 other clients, Letitia Maya and Saul, respectively, to move in with her. Once they arrived at her home, Kat took them to her witch room, which had a large altar decorated with candles and symbols. She knelt down and prayed for each client, asking the angels to bless them with health and prosperity. Saul, a former yoga teacher in Boston, Kat promises Saul a large salary to help her run her business. However, Saul ends up working as a regular housekeeper at Kat's house without any pay. One day, Kat tells Saul that she should start dancing at a strip club, claiming that it is there that she will meet her future husband and have a long, happy marriage. Kat informs Desiree that she has spent a large amount of money on her flight, lodging, food, furniture, and witchcraft, and that Desiree now needs to pay it back. Kat warns Desiree that if she tries to escape, she will be cursed. Kat convinces Desiree to work at a strip club, where she must give all of her earnings to Kat. Desiree works every day and quickly becomes famous as a dancer, socializing with customers. In just 2 weeks, she earns $99,000, which she keeps in a safe in her room. Desiree's passport is also kept in the safe. Kat advises her not to carry any documents with her to avoid revealing that she is Brazilian and living illegally in the United States. Soon after, Kat demands that Desiree must earn at least $1,000 a day, or she will not let her return home. Sometimes Desiree has to sleep on a couch outside. She often feels unwell and exhausted, both mentally and physically. Desiree keeps asking Kat when they will start doing business seriously, but Kat remains vague, insisting that Desiree has not yet paid back the money she invested in her. Kat claims that she had to perform rituals for several days to ensure that Desiree could enter the United States without a visa. Kat lives in a house with her boyfriend Zach and her assistants Desiree, Letitia, and Sol. They must follow strict rules set by Kat. They are not allowed to talk to each other and cannot leave their rooms without Kat's approval. They are not allowed to say no and must follow Kat's every instruction. Additionally, they are forbidden from sharing any details about their lives in Kat's house with anyone. Desiree is allowed to leave the strip club, but instead, she has to date men and work as an escort to earn money. Sol has been with Kat for 42 days and has been in contact with her ex-boyfriend, who is assisting her in her escape. However, she is worried that Kat will find her and force her to return. She knows that Kat has copies of her passport and driver's license, which contain her personal information. Sol also knows that Zach is armed and fears that he might find her and harm Desiree and Letitia, both of whom are still in Kat's home. Kat has created profiles for the girls on dating sites and forced them to work as escorts, earning Kat $3,000 a day. They are also forbidden from communicating with their parents and friends. Desiree and Letitia's families contact the police for help in finding the two girls. Their parents know that the girls had gone to meet someone associated with a blog, but they become worried when they lose contact. News of the two young girls' disappearance quickly spreads across the United States. Meanwhile, Anna, Kat's first assistant, contacts the police to share her experiences living with Kat. Kat then posts on her social media, claiming that she had sheltered Anna in a rental apartment and accusing her of betrayal. In response, Anna and Sol file a police report claiming that Kat has kept them in her home against their will and forced them to work for free. However, after Kat is informed of this, she forces Desiree and Letitia to record videos in which they state that they want to stay with Kat. In these videos, the girls are to praise Kat as a savior and ask their families not to look for them or contact them in any way. They emphasize that they do not want to communicate with their parents and ask to be left alone. After the video is posted, the families become even more concerned, fearing for Desiree and Letitia's safety and feeling the need to rescue them immediately. Kat continues to send threatening messages to Sol and also sends abusive messages to Zach's father, who disowns her. She makes violent threats and wishes him dead. Kat, Zach, and her assistant then move to Maine, where the police begin to follow them. One day while driving, Kat receives a call from the police. They ask her if she is holding the girls against their will, to which Kat replies, "Of course not." The police ask Kat to come to the station to talk, and she agrees. After the call, Kat instructs Desiree and Letitia on how to behave and communicate with the police, even threatening them in the process. She is unaware that the girls have secretly recorded the conversation. The next day, Kat and the girls go to the police station in Maine. Desiree and Letitia are very withdrawn and almost silent. Kat talks about her business, insisting that the girls are her assistants. She believes that many people are jealous of her and want to harm her. The police discover that Kat has manipulated the girls, forcing them to commit illegal acts and lie, which has led to their complete isolation from society. When the girls finally tell the police the truth, Kat is arrested. She faces serious charges, including human trafficking, forced labor, and healthcare fraud. Kat Torres is deported back to Brazil. Since her arrest in November 2022, more than 100 young women have come forward, claiming that they were deceived and harmed by Kat. Kat maintains her innocence, insisting that she does not belong in prison and should not be housed with violent criminals. She expresses her confusion during the trial, stating that when she heard the girls' testimony, she did not understand why they would lie. She laughs when people claim she is a danger to society, has the ability to control others, and consider her a fraud. She points out that these statements are contradictory and mentions that she has been working with people for 9 years. She claims to have a talent, and her clients, who come to her for help, include millionaires and celebrities. However, she has always faced jealousy from those around her and has learned to live with it over time. She notes that some people simply lack talent, while others, like her, excel in many areas. Many people have told her that she has a beautiful voice, and she believes that she will become famous again. Wherever she goes, recognition follows her. In July 2024, Kat Torres is convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. In addition, the Brazilian court bans her from using the internet for the rest of her life. Ana, a victim, shares that she had to see a therapist regularly for 3 years, she has made significant progress and is now able to discuss her experiences without becoming emotional. Anna feels at peace knowing that Kat has been detained. She hopes that other victims will find the courage to speak up and report their stories to the police. Desir has written a book about her traumatic experience living with Kat. She admits that she is still in the process of healing and hopes that her story will serve as a lesson to others. Case 3. The case of Kelly Dwyer. Kelly Dwyer was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago. Her parents divorced when she was 16, but they remained close to her. The divorce had a significant impact on Kelly's life. A year after her parents' divorce, Kelly graduated from high school without a clear plan for her future. To delay her decision to go to college, she worked part-time at a local restaurant. 6 years later, in 2008, Kelly, then 22, moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to start afresh. She enrolled in college, became a yoga instructor, and found a job as a saleswoman to cover her living expenses. She also worked as a nanny to earn extra income. Kelly often visited trendy places around town, creating memorable experiences. When she met her father a month ago, she was living in Milwaukee, and her life was going well. At that time, Kelly was a successful yoga instructor and a popular employee at a sports store. Kelly seemed content with her life, enjoying her job and a year-long relationship with Chris Zacco, a 38-year-old IT manager for a transportation company. Chris had graduated from Boston University in 2009 with a degree in international business and had moved from New York City to Milwaukee for work. He was a hard-working, decent man from a good family who shared Kelly's interests in sports and entertainment. Kelly and Chris seemed to get along well. Chris had built a successful career, owned a luxury apartment, an expensive car, and a large fortune that he had earned himself. Kelly's father approved of him, seeing him as a great match for his daughter. On October 12, 2013, Kelly was nowhere to be seen at work. She was well liked for her punctuality and work ethic, so this struck everyone as odd. Her colleagues tried to contact her, but her cell phone was silent. She was also inactive on social media. Kelly had never left her phone behind before. She simply disappeared, and her loved ones contacted the police to file a missing persons report. However, during the investigation into Kelly's disappearance, detectives found no evidence of enemies or individuals who might want to harm her. All of her belongings were still at home, so police ruled out the possibility that she left voluntarily. What was concerning was that her bank account, phone, and other accounts had no activity. Police suspected that Kelly was in trouble. Since Chris was the last person to see her on October 10, 2013, investigators brought him in for questioning. Chris stated that he and Kelly spent time at his apartment in Lafayette Towers, then went to a nearby bar, socialized, and drank. They returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m., had a good time, and went to bed. At 9 a.m., Kelly left Chris's apartment, and they never saw each other again. Chris insisted that Kelly was not his girlfriend, saying they had an open relationship. He also revealed that he was in love with someone else and had plans for a future with her. This raised suspicions among investigators, who found Chris's story plausible, but noted inconsistencies in his words and actions. To investigate further, detectives interviewed friends who had been with Kelly and Chris the night before Kelly went missing. These friends confirmed that the group had a good time at a bar and then ordered pizza, eating it on a bench outside. Kelly seemed to be in a good mood, sharing her plans for the next day, which included sleeping in, doing yoga, doing laundry, and relaxing. Chris and Kelly left for his apartment that night, where they met another friend who had been invited over for drinks. This friend reported feeling uncomfortable in Chris's apartment because she sensed tension between Chris and Kelly. She recalled that Chris was smoking and chatting with her while Kelly seemed upset. Assuming that Kelly was just tired, the friend thought little of it and left the apartment. However, after talking to Kelly's other friends, investigators discovered that Chris and Kelly were not on good terms. Kelly loves Chris very much, but unfortunately, Chris seems uninterested in their relationship. Chris does not make any long-term plans involving Kelly, which worries her. Kelly's friend, missing, suspects that Chris is being unfaithful and that their relationship will not last. As a result, Kelly loses hope for a future with Chris and begins to look for other options. She creates a profile on a dating website and starts chatting with various men, but she has yet to meet any of them in real life. Kelly's intention is to have a backup plan in case things do not work out with Chris. Additionally, her friends notice bruises on Kelly's arms and neck and ask her about them, but Kelly dismisses their concerns by downplaying the situation. Her friends suspect that the bruises may be a sign of domestic violence, but Kelly never confirms their suspicions. Meanwhile, investigators analyzed security footage from Chris's home. The footage showed Kelly and Chris coming home drunk one night, but Kelly was never seen leaving the apartment. This contradicted Chris's testimony that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the next morning. It was later discovered that another friend of Chris's was at the apartment that night and admitted to using illegal drugs with Chris. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Chris's apartment and found numerous drugs, pills, pipes, and other paraphernalia, leading to Chris's arrest for possession. They also discovered a torn shower curtain that appeared to have been forcefully removed. During questioning, Chris remained calm and admitted to using drugs, but denied distributing them. A search of his cell phone revealed disturbing content, including photos of an unconscious girl in bed and a video of Chris raping the girl, who appeared to have been strangled. This led to suspicions that Chris had drugged and exploited her. Evidence from Chris's phone was linked to Kelly's disappearance. Police returned to Chris's apartment with a dog, which responded to the bed and bathroom area before leading them to the front door. The dog then guided police to Chris's car in the parking lot and to a nearby dumpster. The investigation reached a critical stage when investigators believed Kelly had been murdered. Kelly's boyfriend, Chris, became the prime suspect as evidence suggested he was the last person to see her alive. It is believed that he spent time with Kelly in his apartment before secretly moving her body into his car, a plan that would have escaped the building's 28 surveillance cameras. During the investigation, police analyzed Chris's computer and discovered child pornography. This led to Chris being charged with possession of the images, but he was released on bail and is awaiting trial. The investigation continues as authorities attempt to find Kelly's body and gather enough evidence to build a stronger case against Chris. It should be noted that Chris had claimed to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, and investigators quickly began gathering information about that woman. The investigation uncovered the identity of a woman named Megan, with whom Chris had been secretly in a 3-year relationship, unbeknownst to Kelly, similar to the relationship he had with Kelly. Police came to interview Megan and showed her photos of Chris's apartment. After a thorough inspection, Megan found several items missing, including a shower curtain in the bathroom, a rug, several towels, and the large golf bag that was usually kept in the bedroom. Detectives believe Kelly could fit in the large bag Megan reported missing. After examining the building's entrances and exits, police found a side path that Chris could have taken to get to his car without being seen by surveillance cameras. Reviewing footage from the parking lot cameras, Chris was seen arriving at the house with the large bag, which he placed in the trunk of his car. At 10:06 a.m. on October 11th, Chris left the house in his car. Just 2 minutes later, at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone lost connection at the same location. Over the next 8 hours, footage captured Chris making multiple trips between his home and his car, loading up on belongings, before leaving for good at 6:16 p.m. Chris did not return home until the next day. When investigators asked him what he had been doing the previous day, he said he was moving his summer sports gear to his mother's house. However, no one found this explanation credible. Chris was supposed to meet Megan at 7:30 that evening, but he arrived more than an hour late. Detectives suspected that he was looking for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which would explain his delay. Unfortunately, they were unable to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the morning. As an IT expert, Chris would have known that his phone records could be used to track him. Megan reported that Chris seemed very strange that night. He appeared restless and anxious, and he said that his phone was not working, which was why he was late. After the date, Megan and Chris went to Megan's apartment, where they spent the night. According to Megan, Chris was extremely stressed, had not slept at all, and was sweating so much that she had to change the sheets in the morning. Investigators believe that Chris was worried because he still had Kelly's body in the trunk of his car and was afraid of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide her body. On the morning of October 12th, Chris said goodbye to Megan and left after trying to convince her to temporarily move to Denver, but she refused. Police tracked Chris' location history using his car's GPS, which led them to a cheese shop called Cheese House, 80 miles from Milwaukee. However, it seemed unlikely that Chris would have driven that far just to buy cheese. Chris claimed that he had bought cheese for his parents, presenting a receipt for the cheese at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th, which his parents confirmed. However, The police found it difficult to believe Chris' story, as the same cheese could easily be purchased at a nearby supermarket. They suspected that Chris might have dumped Kelly's body in the area around the cheese store. Further investigation revealed that on his way back, Chris stopped at a sports store and bought new sneakers that afternoon. Detectives suspected that Chris had deliberately discarded his old shoes, possibly to avoid leaving blood or footprints that could be linked to the crime scene. It appeared that he had carefully planned to destroy evidence and create an alibi for himself. Chris, with his analytical mind, had tried to commit the perfect crime. However, investigators were able to spot inconsistencies in his story. Notably, it took him over 2 hours to travel from the cheese house to the sports store, a distance of about 80 kilometers, when it would normally take only an hour. This significant time difference suggests that Chris spent an additional hour on another activity, possibly hiding the body. Police speculate that he may have dumped the body along the way. However, the exact location of the body remains unknown. With a large search area spanning 50 miles, finding the body proved to be a huge challenge. A roadside search eventually led to a discovery. In a wooded area approximately 37 miles from the city, a local resident found human remains while walking. Upon discovery, the resident immediately contacted the sheriff's office. Dental records confirmed the remains were those of Kelly Dwyer. This discovery finally ended Kelly's parents' long and agonizing search for their daughter. The next step was to secure justice by determining the exact cause of her death. Based on available information, the medical examiner believed she may have been strangled, but not forcefully enough to fracture the hyoid bone. There was no direct evidence at the scene where Kelly's body was discovered, such as torn curtains, mats, towels, or bags. However, the position of the skeleton provided valuable insight. The body was found face down, with one arm trapped underneath and the legs bent in a way that suggested it had been hidden for some time after death. This finding further supported the theory that Kelly's body had been hidden in a golf bag, as evidenced by footage of Chris holding the bag and driving into the area where the body was discovered. While these findings were compelling, they were circumstantial and did not directly implicate Chris in Kelly's murder. Ultimately, it took 5 years for Chris to be formally charged in connection with Kelly's disappearance. The charges against him were manslaughter and concealment of a body, as investigators lacked specific evidence to prove intent. Theorizing about the events of that night, detectives speculated that Chris and Kelly had become intimate, but Chris got carried away with strangulation, leading to Kelly's death. The investigation revealed that Chris then ripped off the shower curtain, removed the rug and towels, wrapped Kelly's body, placed it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of it. Throughout the ordeal, Chris maintained his innocence in Kelly's murder. Key evidence was presented at Chris's trial, including CCTV footage, cell phone video of the strangulation, and the search of his apartment by a dog. Megan, who testified against Chris, reported that he was extremely anxious on the day of the incident and was late for a meeting. Additionally, Chris's former girlfriends took the stand, expressing their concerns about his unhealthy obsession with strangulation and rough sex, which had frightened them. The defense countered that there was no direct evidence linking Chris to the crime, and that the prosecution's case was based on speculation and conjecture. Chris had a clean record before the drug possession incident and was a successful IT professional with a stable job. The defense argued that Chris was incapable of murder. However, it was discovered that not all the CCTV footage had been saved, casting doubt on the prosecution's conclusion that Kelly had not left Chris's house. The defense presented a witness who claimed to have seen a girl resembling Kelly in another man's car the weekend after she went missing. Although the witness had previously seen Kelly on TV as a missing person, he was not 100% sure it was her. The defense offered an alternative explanation for Kelly's disappearance, suggesting that she may have left Chris's apartment safely, but was later caught by one of her new boyfriends. The defense also questioned the reliability of the police dog during the investigation. Since the dog's reaction was not captured on video, its alert was based solely on the police officer's subjective interpretation. In response, the prosecution argued that the investigation using the sniffer dog was conducted objectively and transparently, with multiple police officers present and agreeing on the results. Ultimately, the prosecution convinced the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. With no other obvious suspects, the prosecution argued that Chris had planned and executed the crime carefully, deliberately destroying evidence to cover his tracks. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found Chris guilty of first-degree manslaughter and concealing a body. The Kelly family and the prosecution had asked for the maximum sentence of 48 years, while the defense asked for a reduced sentence of 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Zacco, then 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, including 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing a body. In addition, Chris Zacco was sentenced to 19 years for possession of child pornography and possession of narcotics, based on the outcome of his November 2014 trial. Chris Zacco is currently serving his sentence at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065 when he turns 93, essentially making his sentence a life sentence. Chris Zacco was unhappy with the sentence and attempted to appeal, but his appeal was rejected. Case 4. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965 in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, to Cyrus and Melanie Spencer. Growing up, he enjoyed active games and sports, which helped him develop a strong physique. During his high school years, Frank excelled as a member of the wrestling team and showed exceptional leadership abilities. After graduating from high school in 1984, Frank continued his studies at a local university and completed his studies in 1988. After the death of his father, Frank took over the family business, becoming the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts and Used Cars. An important event in the young man's life took place in 1997 when he met Maria through a mutual friend, Paul Siciliano. Frank Spencer and Maria immediately became close, attracted to each other's dynamic personalities. Maria was known for her hot temper, strong will and bold personality, and was also extremely affectionate. However, not everyone was happy with the relationship. Maria's father, Anthony Rocco, did not approve of Frank and even tried to prevent their marriage. Frank's family was also unhappy with his choice. Due to the opposition of both families, the couple decided to elope and rent an apartment. Eventually, their families were forced to accept their feelings. Maria and Frank got married and started a family, having a son and a daughter. They moved to a new house, and Frank worked hard to provide for his family through his auto parts business and sponsorship of racing cars. As the head of the family, his children became his top priority and motivation. However, Maria's priorities were different. She doesn't take care of her family, she's cold to the kids. Unlike her husband, she's not passionate about the marriage. She loves to spend what Frank earns, and what really worries her is money. Maria's behavior increasingly caused problems in their marriage. Frank became increasingly dissatisfied with her selfishness and eccentric behavior. He felt that as a mother, she should grow up and think of others. However, Maria did not change. In 2006, he filed for divorce, fed up with his wife's inappropriate behavior. Sometimes she behaved so irrationally that Frank feared for the children's health. At that time, the idea of divorce seemed like the only right solution. However, the confrontation became more tense as Frank sought to gain custody of the children. He did not trust his ex-wife Maria and believed that she was not capable of properly caring for the children. However, not everyone agreed with his stance. His friend Ron argued that both parents were necessary for the healthy development of the children and advised Frank to negotiate a joint custody agreement with Maria. Despite this, Frank was adamant about pursuing sole custody, believing he knew what was best. In response, Maria also pushed for sole custody and was expecting to receive a substantial child support payment. Their conflict, which grew over time, on several occasions, Maria's erratic behavior led to her attacking him and the children. Frank had to call the police. However, some people did not believe Frank, and an incident that happened in 2008 proved his testimony to be true. An argument broke out between Maria and her ex-mother-in-law near her children's school, leading to Maria's arrest. The problem started when Maria went to pick up her daughter, but Frank's mother intervened, trying to stop her. It was later revealed that there was an agreement between the two. Frank's mother would be the one to pick up the children that day. But Maria changed her mind at the last minute, deliberately taking the children away. After the fight, Maria picked up the child and put her in the car, but did not put her in a seatbelt. The police stopped the car and determined that Maria's actions endangered the child's life and health. As a result, Maria faced charges of disorderly conduct. Furthermore, her ex-husband, Frank, accused her of stalking, claiming that she had followed him on multiple occasions. However, the prosecution could not prove that the child's life was in danger, so the police offered Maria a deal. they would drop the child endangerment charges if she pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and stalking. Maria accepted the deal, pleading guilty and being fined $600. Despite this, Maria did not change her behavior. Instead, she became more outrageous after the incident. Frank's acquaintances and relatives grew increasingly concerned as he shared his complaints about Maria. She began to threaten, and her stalking behavior continued. Several of Maria's co-workers later revealed that she often expressed deep hatred for Frank, even stating that she was willing to end his life. This led one co-worker to jokingly call her the Black Widow. Despite the tension, Frank tried to stay calm and resolve the situation amicably. He tried to reason with Maria several times, but she refused to stop her behavior. As a precaution, Frank began to record their conflicts. His intention was not to get Maria into legal trouble, but to have evidence in case things escalated further. Frank just wanted to live and work in peace, but Maria's actions continued to cross the line. By 2009, the Frank's divorce proceedings had dragged on for a long time, with the children staying with their father, Frank. Meanwhile, Frank had begun dating a woman named Julie Dent. Although Maria claimed that she did not mind Frank's new relationship, she was said to have been upset by Julie's closeness to the children. Frank believed that Maria's jealousy was the root cause of the troubles. Maria's anger grew, and in February 2009, she left a voicemail warning Julie to stay away from her children. However, the situation really escalated when Maria's father, Rocco, was released from prison after 5 years for fraud. Frank knew of his ex-father-in-law's reputation and feared more trouble, believing that Maria had inherited her father's erratic temperament. At this point, those around Frank noticed that he was becoming increasingly anxious. After Rocco is released, a robbery occurs at Frank's office, where important documents related to the divorce proceedings are stolen. The next day, Maria contacts Frank, saying that she discovered a trash bag containing interesting items on the porch. Frank understands the implication and advises her to return the stolen items. He also reports the break-in to the police, but despite their best efforts, they are unable to prove that anyone was involved in the incident. According to the police, no evidence of the perpetrators was found. However, it is clear that Maria and her father had a motive for the crime. The investigation considered Maria a suspect, but the case was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. The police's efforts led Maria to return the documents she had taken from Frank, as these documents did not contain any important information that could be used as evidence in court. The situation continued to worsen until it reached a breaking point. Maria began sending threats to Frank's new girlfriend, Julie, on social media. She was still upset that the children were still in contact with Julie. Unlike Maria, Julie remained calm and enjoyed spending time with Frank and the children. She tried not to get involved in a complicated relationship between Frank and his ex-wife, but Julie was deeply troubled and Maria prioritized revenge over parental responsibility. The disputes between Frank and his ex-wife Maria continued until 2010, when Frank finally lost patience. He went to the police and asked them to evaluate Maria's behavior, providing their correspondence as evidence. The correspondence contained indirect threats, but Maria claimed that this was her way of communicating and that she had no intention of causing harm. Once again, Maria's guilt could not be proven because her warnings sounded vague. This time, Maria was not punished. In January 2010, Frank and Julie planned a romantic getaway to the Caribbean, but on the eve of the trip, a fire broke out at his mother's house. Although no one was injured, the house was devastated by flames and smoke. Witnesses reported that Maria drove up to the scene with her neighbors and acquaintances, smiled at the fire, and drove away. After firefighters extinguished the fire, a dog owned by one of Frank's children was found in the ashes. The incident became so serious that Frank had to call the police again, as it became clear that the fire was no accident. Maria's actions had escalated to the point where it was clear that she would not stop until she achieved her goal. The police found no evidence of arson in the first fire, and the fire was ruled an accident. Maria later sent Frank a text message in which she gloated about what had happened and wrote about how karma had caught up with him, and that since her life had been ruined, he could expect more consequences. When the police took no action, Maria became bolder and began openly threatening Frank and his new partner Julie. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house. Fortunately, she was able to escape by jumping from the porch, but her house was severely damaged and uninhabitable. Frank invited Julie to move in with him, although he was concerned that this would anger Maria further. but they had no choice. At the same time, an investigation into the cause of the fire was underway. Since Julie's home was in a different district, she and Frank hoped that the police investigation would be fair. However, the police were unable to help due to lack of evidence, and the fire was ruled an accident. Despite this, Julie was determined to get to the bottom of the matter and appealed to her superiors. This prompted the investigation. Unexpectedly, flares were found in Julie's backyard. Further investigation revealed another flare that could have caused the fire. In addition, experts determined that the steps on the roof of the house had been doused with a flammable mixture. Ultimately, after all the tests and examinations, the cause of the fire was determined to be arson. However, as in previous cases, no one was directly implicated in the crime due to lack of evidence, and those responsible were able to avoid punishment once again. In the summer of 2012, Frank and Julie made a plan to pretend to break up to distract Maria. However, the expected peace did not last long, when Frank's body was discovered on July 3rd, just a few weeks after the couple broke up. When Joe, a friend of Frank's, decided to visit Frank because he had not heard from him recently, when Joe arrived at the bungalow, he felt increasingly worried. The front door was slightly open, and there were stains near the entrance. When he entered the house, he saw Frank lying on the floor dead. Joe moved closer and noticed dried blood in Frank's ear. Without hesitation, he called the emergency services. As news of the incident spread throughout the county, people suspected they knew who was responsible for this heinous crime. Police found several key pieces of evidence at the scene, including large pools of blood, extensive drag marks, clear shoe prints on the floor, and bloody gloves in the kitchen. These were sent for analysis, which revealed that the shoe prints matched the size and style of shoes worn by Maria's father, Rocco. Additionally, Maria's skin particles were discovered inside the gloves, although she had not lived with Frank for over a year, making it unlikely that the gloves had been left behind by accident. The evidence linked Rocco and Maria to the crimes, leading to their arrests. An autopsy and ballistics analysis revealed that Frank had been shot with two different types of guns. He was initially shot with a .30 caliber sniper rifle while standing near the front door. A sniper's nest was discovered approximately 115 feet from the house. The bullet passed through Frank's hand and into his chest, severing a vital artery and causing a fatal wound. However, the attackers continued to attack. They dragged Frank into the house, where a second shot was fired into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. By that time, the man was already dead, so the final shot was considered an act of revenge. The violent nature of the crime suggests that the shooter had a deep hatred for Frank. Based on this evidence, police suspect that Rocco fired the first shot from the sniper rifle, while Maria fired the last shot. Additionally, police discovered that Frank's car and dog were missing from the house. A review of traffic camera footage showed that Frank's car had been driven away from his home onto an interstate. However, the identity of the driver could not be determined. The car was later found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's home and 5 miles from Maria's. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found inside the car. 2 days after the incident, Frank's dog was found at a wedding in Dauphin. Attendees immediately recognized the dog as well-groomed, with an electronic chip, and the dog was returned to Frank's mother. It turned out that Frank had acquired a new pet for his children after a fire. This lucky discovery helped to clarify some aspects and effectively expose the crime. According to the investigation, the criminals took the dog with them when they fled the scene. On the way home, Rocco stopped, and during this time, attracted by the smell of food nearby, the dog escaped. It then went to a house where a wedding was taking place. This allowed the police to prove that Rocco's phone was near the wedding venue on the day of the murder, while his Harrisburg residence was 12 miles away, contradicting his claim that he was at home. It is likely that Maria was the one who came up with the idea of bringing the dog to the children, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Rocco admitted that his son-in-law had asked him for help several times and had visited him the day before his death, which would explain the traces found at the crime scene. However, Rocco could not explain the presence of the pool of blood. His testimony did not sound sincere, and no one could confirm whether the men were on good terms. Rocco confessed that Frank had given him the card that same day, likely in an attempt to justify the finding of his fingerprints in the victim's home. By making this statement, Rocco inadvertently admitted to having been present at the crime scene the day before. Searches were conducted at Rocco's and Maria's homes for the murder weapon, but no weapon was found, as it was likely that Rocco had thrown it away. Maria also denied any guilt, claiming that the glove had accidentally appeared in Frank's home, possibly brought there by the children. Ultimately, the suspects were released to go home. However, the police continued to collect evidence necessary for the case. The police found a new lead when Derek Reed, a friend of Frank's, spoke to Maria at a school football game. Maria revealed that the last thing her husband saw before he died was her face. This new information caught the attention of the state attorney general, who was already unhappy with the way the police handled Frank's reports. Many people also complained about the matter, and an internal investigation was launched. However, it was difficult to prove that the police had neglected their duties. The police claimed that much of the information Frank provided lacked concrete evidence. The police attempted to determine the guilt of the suspects in the case, as well as their involvement in previous crimes, including stalking. And the major interrogation took place in 2013. Maria and Rocco maintained their innocence throughout the process, denying all 12 charges against them. However, their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to charges of providing false testimony. Prosecutors said that Maria and Rocco arrived at Frank's house together, deliberately not using their own car to avoid attention, instead fleeing the scene in the victim's car. In late 2014, Maria was arrested again. Meanwhile, Rocco escaped. After a final interrogation, he boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. Police considered his actions an escape attempt and evidence of his guilt. For nearly a year, Rocco evaded arrest, but was finally arrested in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He was arrested by local police, and Rocco attempted to fight deportation back to the United States. However, his efforts were unsuccessful, and he was returned to his homeland to face justice. In the fall of 2015, Maria went to trial. Throughout the proceedings, she maintained her innocence and instead blamed her father for the crimes. Maria claimed that she loved Frank and never wanted him dead. However, many witnesses came forward to reveal her true nature, sharing accounts of persistent threats, stalking, and arson. The trial lasted more than a week, after which the jury returned a verdict, finding Maria Spencer guilty on all charges. These included murder, arson, burglary, conspiracy, and menacing. As a result, Maria was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 50 years. Court observers said Maria smiled throughout the trial. In a later interview, she explained her behavior, saying, "Because I didn't end his life, I tried to stay positive." A few years later, Rocco's trial began. He was furious about his daughter's accusations. Rocco claimed he was only trying to help his daughter and opposed violence. He wanted to say that Maria was the one who encouraged the crime. Despite his claims, physical evidence showed that Rocco was more involved than he let on. In the fall of 2018, Rocco Franklin was convicted of murder, robbery, and arson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 45 years. When he was sentenced, Rocco, 77, blew a kiss to the prosecutor and police, then cursed the judge. Years later, Rocco asked for a retrial, arguing that his defense attorney had been ineffective in his conviction. Maria also tried to appeal her case, but both father and son were unsuccessful. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors, and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak, and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night, Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt it deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices and a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, she heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions, and Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. "I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy, and that he might have had a scar or something on his face." 4 days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed, and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case, and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time. As witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, one advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, it later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released, and less than a year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence, just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God." The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ, but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger, but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom, since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10th, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis' grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years, she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had heard her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis' actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious. Hello friends. Case 4. The case of Menhez Saman. Menhez Saman, a Canadian with a promising future. However, instead of attending York University to study mechanical engineering, he chose to deceive his parents and live a lie. As the expected graduation date drew near, maintaining this double life became increasingly difficult, severely impacting his mental state. This ultimately led to the tragic outcome of him murdering his entire family. In an attempt to gain attention, Menhez posted photos of his crime on his Discord channel. Initially, many believed it was a joke, but it soon became clear that the photos were genuine. Discord's anonymous features allowed Menhez to hide his true identity, making it challenging for users to uncover his real name, age, and location. In Bangladesh, a country plagued by poverty and overpopulation, many sought a better life abroad. Manuruz, born in 1971, felt an insatiable desire to improve his circumstances. Despite the country's rapid development, Manuruz yearned for more. He met and married Mamataz, born in India, and they shared a dream of building a better future together in Toronto, Canada. After 2 years of preparation, Manuruz and Mamataz made the move to Toronto. They settled into their new life and eventually started a family. 6 years after their arrival, they welcomed a son, Menhez, followed by a daughter, Mesa, 2 years later. Mamataz and her husband Manuruz were loving and dedicated parents who worked tirelessly to ensure their family's well-being and happiness. Mamataz was particularly close to their children and was known for her kindness and generosity. She spent a lot of time caring for her family and was always willing to lend a helping hand. In her community, Mamataz was a respected and well-liked figure, both in her neighborhood and among fellow Bangladeshi immigrants. Manuruz was a more reserved person, but he was also highly respected in the community. He was a devout Muslim who prioritized his family's well-being above all else. As a taxi driver, Manuruz was very familiar with the city of Toronto, thanks to his many years of experience. His dedication to his job earned him numerous awards, including being named the Best Employee of the Month and one of the top taxi drivers in his company. Both Mamataz and Manuruz had high aspirations for their children, Melissa and Menhez. Having successfully navigated the challenges of moving to a big city themselves, they expected their children to achieve great things. They dreamed of their children securing high-paying, prestigious jobs that would bring them comfort and prosperity. After relocating from poor conditions, Manuruz and Mamataz were determined to provide their children with every opportunity to succeed. They worked hard to achieve their aspirations, which led to gradual but steady success. The family's first major milestone was buying a modest house on Moen Road in Scarborough. With careful financial planning, they then acquired 2 investment properties, one in Scarborough and another in nearby Danforth. Mamataz took charge of managing the properties, and over time, the family's wealth grew steadily. As the family's assets increased, Mamataz felt a greater sense of responsibility towards her 2 children in their 3 properties. To help with the workload, Mamataz's mother, Firoza Begum, moved from India to join the family. This allowed Mamataz to strike a better balance between her work and personal life. In 2006, the family upgraded to a larger 4-bedroom house in Markham. At the time, it was widely believed that a career in medicine or engineering was the key to success. Manuruz and Mamataz wanted their children to pursue these fields, with Menhez aspiring to become a neurosurgeon and Menhez aiming to become an engineer. However, their children had different plans. Melissa, in particular, was a rebellious child who resisted her parents' views and often pushed them away, despite showing great potential. Melissa frequently ran away from home, drank excessively, and used illicit substances, leading to reckless behavior. This behavior prompted strict and sometimes questionable intervention from her parents. If she failed to return home on time, she would be forced to spend the night outside. However, her mother, Mama Taz, would occasionally unlock the back door to allow her to enter. The conflicts between Melissa and her father often escalated, drawing the attention of the police. In contrast, Menhez had a distinctly different personality. He was often described as shy and introverted, but he shared a warm and loving relationship with his mother. Mama Taz was extremely devoted to her son, often giving in to his wishes and catering to his needs. She would drive him wherever he needed to go, cook his meals, keep his room tidy, and greet him after school with a home-cooked meal. As the eldest son, Menhez faced pressure from his parents to succeed and meet their high expectations. To cope with this pressure, he found solace in the world of video games, particularly massively multiplayer online, MMO, games like Perfect World. In this virtual world, Menhez could express himself freely and connect with people worldwide, overcoming his shyness and self-doubt. The game became a refuge for him, and he spent most of his free time immersed in it. Menhez's life was quite routine. Apart from accompanying his father to the mosque, he spent most of his time in his room, playing online games with his friends. However, his life took a significant turn after he graduated from high school. He thrilled his parents with the news that he had been accepted into the mechanical engineering program at York University. Initially, this achievement brought immense joy to his parents, Maniras and Mamadas. However, it also intensified the pressure on Menhez, as he was now expected to excel and had no room for error. As a result, he became even more introverted and immersed himself in the online world. Menhez started playing an updated version of the Perfect World game, which involved a group of players and a set of rules. He used the social network Discord to stay in touch with his friends and fellow players. The game's atmosphere was generally friendly, and players often formed close bonds with one another. In fact, many of them remained in contact even outside of the game. Menhez felt more at ease expressing himself in the virtual world of the game than he did in real life, where the atmosphere was often tense. As a result, he found solace in the game, using it as an escape from the stresses of reality. In contrast, Melissa acted out her frustrations in the real world, frequently clashing with her parents over various issues. Her rebellious behavior eventually led to an arrest for shoplifting, although she was fortunate to have the charges dropped in exchange for community service. After leaving home to live with her boyfriend, the tension in the household did not dissipate. Instead, it seemed to intensify, putting even more pressure on Menhez to find ways to cope. As a result, he became even more deeply immersed in the game, using it as a means of escaping the increasingly unbearable reality at home. As Melissa broke free from her parents' expectations, they began to pin their hopes on her son, Menhez, as the family's savior. They boasted about his engineering career at York University, but this turned out to be a fabrication. In reality, Menhez attended Seneca Community College, a less prestigious institution. Menhez struggled academically, felt isolated, and abandoned his faith, which deeply disappointed his devout parents. He often expressed frustration about his parents' constant interference in his life, which affected his personal relationships. Menhez met a girl online, which infuriated his parents and further fueled his resentment. However, he found a sense of independence through the online game Perfect World, where he connected with friends in a community on Discord. Initially, Menhez performed well in school, but his grades began to slip as his gaming obsession spiraled out of control. Menhez's excessive gaming habits started to take a toll on his academic performance. He began skipping classes and struggled to keep up with his studies, resulting in him having to retake several subjects. Eventually, he lost interest in studying altogether and stopped attending classes, opting to focus solely on gaming instead. To avoid arousing his parents' suspicions, Menhez would leave home every day pretending to go to York University. He wasn't actually attending classes. Instead, he would spend his days playing games at a cafe on his laptop, working out at the gym, and then returning to gaming until late at night. In online conversations with his gaming friends, Menhez would occasionally joke about leaving the group and make cryptic comments about potentially going to prison. However, these statements were not taken seriously by his online friends, as they were familiar with his tendency to make humorous remarks. Additionally, Menhez often made jokes about sensitive topics such as homophobia and religion, but since it was a gaming community, no one took his comments seriously. Menhez's sense of humor took a darker and more aggressive turn over time. He started making jokes that were intentionally provocative, trying to elicit a reaction from others in the community. However, his attempts at humor were so off-putting that they led to multiple complaints. Ultimately, the community administrators banned him due to his behavior. Menhez became more and more isolated. In contrast, Melissa turned her life around, repaired her relationship with her parents, and even gained admission to York University. From the outside, the family appeared happy and successful, with new beginnings and a promising future. As Menhez realized he was about to lose his privileged status as the golden child, he committed a horrific crime on July 27, 2019, just one day before his expected graduation ceremony. On that day, the family was preoccupied with their daily routines. Menhez's mother and grandmother went about their usual schedule, attending a daybreak event, unaware of the impending tragedy. Menhez began to carry out his horrific plan by sneaking into his mother's bedroom. He struck her on the head with a crowbar, knocking her unconscious, and then slit her throat to ensure she was dead. He repeated this brutal act with his grandmother. After committing these heinous crimes, Menhez calmly returned to his room and opened Discord, where he sent a disturbing photo of his mother's mutilated body next to the crowbar. The recipients of the photo were initially unsure if it was a joke, as Menhez was known for his dark humor. However, the image was extremely realistic and did not appear to be a prank. Menhez was a well-known figure in the perfect world gaming community, but his behavior had always been unsettling, earning him a negative reputation among many players. The situation took a disturbing turn when Menhez posted two photos that seemed to show a murder scene. The images were extremely realistic and did not seem to be a joke. Menhez then made a chilling post claiming that he had killed his mother and grandmother and was waiting for his sister and father to return home so he could do the same to them. As the situation worsened and became more intense, other gamers began to take Menhez seriously, fearing that his threats could lead to more deaths. Discord users were convinced that they were witnessing a series of crimes unfold in real time, but felt powerless to intervene. Desperate to prevent further harm, players tried to uncover Menhez's identity, but he had hidden his personal information, leaving no clues about his name, age, or whereabouts. In an effort to gather more information, users reached out to Menhez's friend, Junior, asking him to share any details he might know. When Junior confronted Menhez about the disturbing images, Menhez revealed that his threats were genuine and that he planned to kill his father and sister soon. Meanwhile, Melissa returned home to an eerily quiet house. Unbeknownst to her, Menhez was waiting inside. As she entered the house, he attacked her with a crowbar, striking her on the head, and then slit her throat. After committing the crime, Menhez took a photo of Melissa's body and sent it to his friend John via private message. Menhez posted a photo with a disturbing message, claiming that he had struggled with his sister Melissa for 10 minutes, during which she cried and screamed. In a private message to John, Menhez expressed extreme self-loathing, stating that his parents would be ashamed of him and that he was a coward and subhuman. Menhez then sent John several more photos, including one of the murder weapon and a selfie with a bloody knife. John was horrified and shared these photos with the rest of the group, confirming that Menhez had indeed committed a third murder. Group members quickly saved the photos as evidence against Menhez. Meanwhile, Menhez continued to act normally, waiting for his father to return home. When his father, Moner Eyes, entered the garage, Menhez ambushed him, stabbing him in the neck, just like his other victims. Menhez took a photo of the victim, which the group was unable to prevent. In a shocking turn of events, Menhez shared a disturbing message with online friends, stating, "I consider myself a coward and a loser. As an atheist, I don't believe in an afterlife, so I feared death and wanted others to die instead, sparing them suffering. I realize now how pathetic and selfish I've been." What followed was even more alarming. Menhez told another online friend that he had murdered his entire family and was prepared to spend the rest of his life in prison. He then invited this friend to view photos of the crime scene. However, the story takes a crucial turn. One of the online friends discovered a way to obtain Menhez's IP address, which could reveal his location. With this information, the group was able to track Menhez to his home in Toronto. A user from Minnesota, who was part of the online conversation, contacted their local police department which in turn alerted the Toronto police to Menhez's location. The police began their investigation after receiving information from an anonymous source. Meanwhile, Menhez was still active online, chatting with users who were inquiring about his next steps. He claimed he would try new things, including drinking, smoking, and reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend. However, it was only a matter of time before the police caught up with him. They were able to track his IP address, contacted his internet service provider, and obtained his physical address. Surprisingly, Menhez did not take steps to cover his digital tracks, despite being an avid gamer and computer user. Just 12 hours after the crime, officers arrived at the Menhez residence. As they looked up, they saw Menhez looking out of his bedroom window. At this point, the police had limited information and evidence, relying mostly on tips from online users. They were uncertain about the accuracy of the reports, but Menhez unexpectedly made the police's job easier. After posting a farewell message on Discord, announcing that the police had arrived, he voluntarily went downstairs, opened the door, and surrendered to the authorities. When questioned by the police, Menhez responded that this was his family's home, and that they would discover the truth for themselves. The bodies of Monarese and Melissa were the first to be found, followed by Mamatez and Firoza, near the entrance to the house. Menhez was immediately arrested by the police on suspicion of murder. He was then taken to the local police station for further questioning. During the interrogation, Menhez displayed unusual calmness, showing no visible emotion. The lack of emotional response was notable, as if he was discussing an inconsequential event. He was ultimately charged with 4 counts of murder, 3 first-degree murders, and 1 second-degree murder. In court, the evidence strongly indicated his guilt. The Perfect World gaming community had preserved a record of all his online messages, which serve as evidence against him, confirming his culpability to a great extent. Case 5. The case of Chris Watts. Shannon Razusek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shannon and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shannon and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shannon had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shannon defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shannon was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shannon was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shannon expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shannon's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shannon worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shannon had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shannon loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia Darasette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shannon had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shannon got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris' reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shannon was having a baby boy. Shannon and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shannon was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shannon took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shannon's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shannon was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shannon expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions and that Shannon's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shannon was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris' communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shannon and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shannon was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shannon felt hurt and surprised by Chris' distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shannon felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shannon sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shannon suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shannon too much to do that. But Shannon was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shannon, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shannon that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shannon was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shannon proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shannon was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shannon came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shannon soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shannon opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shannon was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris' account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shannon returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shannon entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shannon's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shannon missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shannon, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shannon's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shannon would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response, because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's bodycam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shanann and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. A camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shanann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shanann or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave in to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shanann hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shanann might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shanann and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shanann during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shanann and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shanann. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shanann and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shannon was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shannon emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shannon, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shannon's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shannon was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shannon's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shannon was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shannon in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shannon's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their two daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Case 6. The case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson, a 23-year-old mother of two, had just found a house on a quiet street near Lake Erie. She was thrilled to have a new place to call home, especially after separating from her husband Wayne and going through a divorce. Despite the challenges they faced as parents, Heather and Wayne were once a happy couple, but their marriage didn't survive the struggles. After the breakup, Heather faced tough times, but she didn't give up. She focused on making her children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Junior, happy. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle arrived at a house at 2:30 p.m. as they had planned. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked. This was unusual, as Heather would normally let her know if she had to change plans. Danielle's concern grew as she realized Heather and her children were not at home. Danielle tried to reach Heather by calling her mother, Jody, but was unable to get in touch with her that day. Failing that, Danielle contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Then Danielle spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch, which made her increasingly anxious. She knew Heather would never leave the house without it. As the hours ticked by with no call from Heather, Jody grew more and more uneasy, her intuition screaming warning signals. She decided to take action and phone the police, asking them to perform a welfare check. When the officers arrived at the address, they knocked on the door but received no response. Next, they made their way around the house, peering through the windows, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. With no signs of forced entry or any indication of foul play, they departed. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, friends of Heather, arrived at her house, having learned that she was missing. They knocked on the front door, but there was no response. Reiner then proceeded to the back porch, forced open the door, and entered the home. Upon entering, they discovered Heather's lifeless body in the bedroom, completely naked, and immediately called the emergency services. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a police officer with the Sandusky Force, responded to the call and entered Heather Jackson's home. He found Heather's body awkwardly positioned between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature constricting her neck. Notably, the TV in the house was still operational, but the children were absent, their room was empty. While inspecting the house, the officers came across a door to a utility closet that they hadn't checked yet. Upon opening it, Sergeant Eric Gray Bill was met with a horrific sight. Stacked boxes, and behind them, the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately sealed off the area, treating it as a crime scene. The local officers were left stunned, having never encountered anything so heinous in their careers. The brutal murder of innocent children left them struggling to comprehend how someone could commit such an atrocity. The forensic examination results only added to the devastation felt by Heather's family and friends. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed autopsies on the 3 victims. She determined that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation, and observed that Heather's rectum was found to be more open than usual after death. Dr. Scala Barnett attributed this to the likely introduction of an object into the rectum around the time of death, which kept it in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett also testified that Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear had been rolled up, suggesting that the body had been redressed. Furthermore, Selena's rectum showed a similar dilation to her mother's, again indicating that an object was present in her rectum at or around the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, reported that the anal swabs taken from Selena Jackson contained seminal fluid. Cox also observed a suspicious stain on Selena Jackson's underwear, which she excised and tested, finding it to contain a sperm cell. The police were under pressure to swiftly identify and apprehend the culprit behind these heinous crimes. Heather's residence was conveniently located near Firelands Regional Medical Center, and investigators believed that surveillance footage from the building's CCTV cameras might aid in their search for the perpetrator. Upon reviewing the footage, they spotted a car pulling up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. However, the camera's distance from the house and the darkness hindered visibility. The car's headlights provided the only clues, revealing that the vehicle had backed into the driveway and remained stationary for some time. 11 minutes later, at 11:08 p.m., the headlights flickered back to life, and the driver departed the scene. Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the 2 men who found Heather's body, were taken to the police station for questioning. Dan, who had been friends with Heather, was the first to be interrogated. He explained that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to check on her. Dan admitted that he had to push the door hard to gain entry, and as a result, the police asked him to provide DNA samples. He consented, and a swab was taken from his mouth. After that, he was released. Next, the investigators questioned Thomas Hansen. He revealed that he had spoken to Heather over the phone the previous night and was near her house around 11 p.m. According to Thomas, he drove up to Heather's house but didn't enter. They chatted briefly outside, and then he drove home. This information helped the investigators identify the car seen on the CCTV footage as belonging to Thomas. Thomas also claimed that he didn't enter Heather's house that night because she wasn't alone. There was a man, known to him as Josh, inside with her. Hansen's statement echoed Reiner's. He claimed that upon learning of Heather's disappearance, he rushed to her house to investigate. After providing a DNA sample, he was released by the police. The police shifted their focus to Josh, who was at Heather's house shortly before her death. They quickly determined his whereabouts and brought him in for questioning. Josh acknowledged having known Heather for several years. He confessed to being at her house that night, stating that they watched TV while the kids slept in their room. He also mentioned visiting the store to buy breakfast for the children, returning to the house and staying for a while before a friend picked him up around 1 a.m. Notably, Josh admitted to having consensual, intimate contact with Heather. The investigators visited the store, where Josh claimed to have purchased breakfast for the kids, and reviewed the CCTV footage. The footage confirmed Josh's alibi, showing him entering the store at 11:20 p.m. However, this did not rule out the possibility that he was involved in the crime. As the last known person to have contact with Heather, Josh remained the prime suspect. Josh also provided a DNA sample, which was analyzed along with those of Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner. The lab results cleared Hansen and Reiner, as their DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies. Josh's DNA, on the other hand, matched the DNA found on Heather's body, but not her children's bodies. This indicated that there was another man present in the house that night. Josh had previously confessed to being in a romantic relationship with Heather, which accounted for his DNA being present on her body. However, the police were now tasked with identifying a different individual whose DNA matched the DNA found on the bodies of all 3 victims. The investigators quickly ruled out Heather's husband Wayne, who was in the process of divorcing her, as a suspect because he lived in a different state. The detectives then focused on Heather's cell phone records, hoping to find some answers. Upon receiving the report, they discovered that Heather had been very active on her phone right up until the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police now needed to identify the owner of the phone number she had called. 36 hours after Heather's death, the police obtained additional CCTV footage. While analyzing it, the investigators noticed a white car pulling up to her house at around 3 a.m. This coincided with the time Heather stopped using her phone, which might not have been a coincidence. The officers also saw that the white car drove away about an hour later, around the time when Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage quality was poor and didn't allow the police to see the license plates, they were able to determine that the car was a Cadillac. Once the investigators received information from the phone company about the owner of the phone number Heather had called, they had a lead. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton. It was with him that Heather had her 30-second phone conversation. At 3:12 a.m., Curtis Clinton's background check revealed alarming details. Police records showed that Clinton was released from prison in February after serving a 13-year sentence for 2 counts of felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He had pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler from Fostoria, who was found strangled, naked and bound in a bathtub. The similarity to Heather's case, combined with the fact that Clinton was released from prison just 6 months prior to Heather and her children's death, raised concerns among investigators. It seemed possible that Clinton had reverted to his previous violent behavior. Furthermore, Clinton owned a white Cadillac, which made him the prime suspect. The police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. If Clinton was indeed responsible for the murders, he had to be stopped before he could harm anyone else. The police went to Clinton's last known address, but he was not there. A few hours later, a patrol officer found a white Cadillac on a nearby street, but Clinton himself was still missing. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station on the night of the crime. The investigators headed to the gas station to review the CCTV footage. On the recordings, they identified Clinton and his distinctive white Cadillac. Despite already knowing that Heather and her children were deceased, Clinton was seen purchasing water and beer, displaying a calm demeanor. Fearing Clinton might flee, the investigators nonetheless soon received a tip that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They swiftly arrived at the hospital and apprehended the suspect they were pursuing. Clinton was arrested and taken into custody, but he vehemently denied any involvement in the tragic deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. During questioning, Clinton revealed that he had been in a romantic relationship with Heather for 5 months, providing her with both financial and emotional support to cope with her numerous personal issues. Clinton claimed to have limited knowledge of Heather's children and stated that he last saw Heather on Tuesday, September 6th. He alleged that on that day he gave her $328 and they engaged in an intimate encounter. The investigator told Clinton that phone records revealed a 3:12 a.m. call with Heather on September 8th. Clinton corrected himself, saying he had gotten his days wrong, and it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw Heather, not Thursday night. According to Clinton, he didn't stay at her house for long, dropping off the money and engaging in intimate contact before leaving. He explained, "I did my thing and left, but couldn't recall what time he got home." Clinton claimed that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left. He said that while he was with Heather, she mentioned that somebody had texted or called her, and she seemed irritated. When informed that he was the last person who had contact with Heather, Clinton denied. However, the examination indicated the opposite. The DNA on the bodies of all 3 victims belonged to Curtis Clinton. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the county jail. Curtis Clinton was charged with multiple counts during the investigation. It also turned out that 6 days before the death of Heather and her children, Curtis Clinton attacked a 17-year-old girl whose identity was not disclosed by the police. He choked her and forced her to have intimate contact with him. When he let her go, she went to the hospital, and the police at the hospital doctors took DNA samples from her body, which also led to Curtis Clinton. Clinton moved for a change of venue, arguing that extensive media coverage had saturated the county at the time of the offenses, and was likely to resume once the trial started. The trial court denied the motion for a change of venue, stating that while the pretrial publicity was extensive and adverse to the defendant, The publicity was not sufficiently prejudicial that readers and viewers could not realistically shut it from sight. The court rejected claims of presumed prejudice, stating that the defendant, Curtis Clinton, did not hesitate to take the lives of Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and that his DNA was found inside Selena's body before she died. Clinton knew he was facing the death penalty, but he did not want to die and therefore did everything to achieve a different outcome in the trial. He even remembered what justice was when allowed to speak before being sentenced for the capital crimes. Clinton neither begged for his life nor apologized to the victim's family. Instead, he lashed out at the prosecutor, Kevin Baxter, and vowed he would win on appeal and have his case retried. He stated, "I don't respect the prosecutor, and as I said, I will be back again. I know there's a lot of people who are upset here, but I'm the one who's going through this." This statement triggered a disgusted response from some of the 70 people present at the hearing in November 2013. Curtis Clinton was given the death penalty for the murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. When he learned he would be executed by lethal injection, Clinton became violent towards Heather's brother, who expressed a preference for Clinton to die in prison at the hands of other inmates. Deputies and court staff restrained Clinton, who was handcuffed, and pushed him into a chair, while other officers restrained Heather's brother as they exchanged profanities in a packed Erie County courtroom. Heather's brother was angry, stating that the only thing Clinton should be grateful for is that his life was spared by being placed on death row, and that he wished Clinton had been given a life sentence in prison, allowing his friends to harm him. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for the murder of 3-year-old Selena, and an additional 10 years in prison for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children. In 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court postponed Curtis Clinton's execution, which was scheduled for September 15, 2021, pending the exhaustion of all state post-conviction proceedings, including any appeals. As of now, Curtis Clinton remains on death row, and his sentence has been upheld, but his execution will not take place in the near future. Ohio is currently holding over 100 inmates on death row, but Governor Mike DeWine is doubtful that any of them will be executed in the remaining 3 years of his term. The last execution in the state took place on July 18, 2018, and since then, Ohio has had an effective halt on capital punishment. According to Governor DeWine, the reason for this is that lethal injection is the only approved method of execution in Ohio. But pharmaceutical companies have threatened to retaliate if the state uses their products for this purpose. This would have a significant impact on the state's health department and other agencies. The governor has told the state legislature that the only way to resume executions is to change the law to permit alternative methods of execution. But so far, the legislature has not taken any action, and DeWine does not expect them to do so. Case 7. The case of Manjit Pangali. In every person's life, 2 decisions hold utmost significance: their career path and the choice of a life partner. Securing one's desired career alongside a caring and affectionate life companion can make life feel like a flawless masterpiece. Manjit Pangali, a resident of Vancouver, Canada, had a life that seemed to embody this ideal. But the tragic conclusion of her beautiful existence left an indelible mark on the entire nation of Canada. October 18, 2006 marked the date when the news of Manjit Pangali's disappearance emerged. However, just 5 days later, on October 23rd, her charred body was discovered on a beach shore. After this discovery, the police promptly reached the crime scene and informed Manjit's in-laws about the incident. The news quickly spread across the city of Vancouver that a partially burnt body of a woman had been found on the beach. Manjit's family was unable to comprehend why someone would commit such an act against her, as Manjit was known to be a person who always greeted everyone with a friendly smile. However, after months of investigation, the real killer of Manjit was identified, which surprised Manjit's family a lot. But in the end, to know how Manjit disappeared, who killed her, and how the killer killed Manjit, we will also need to know a little about Manjit's background. Manjit was a Canadian resident of Indian origin, residing in Vancouver, British Columbia, with her husband Muktir Pangali and their 3-year-old daughter Maya. Manjit's family had come to Canada in search of a better life and settled in Vancouver. They had worked hard to provide their family and children with every possible happiness. Manjit had a happy childhood. Like any young woman, she also had dreams. She had decided long ago that she wanted to become a teacher. Manjit pursued her education to become a teacher at the university, and it was during this time that she met Muktir. Muktir's family also hailed from India, and he had come to Canada to pursue his career in the teaching field. According to Manjit, Muktir was a cheerful person just like her, which gradually made Manjit start liking him. Their meeting at the university gradually developed into feelings of love. After dating for a while, they eventually decided to get married. When both families found out that they both wanted to get married, they were quite happy. Muktir's family trusted that Muktir is a good and responsible guy who will always keep their daughter happy. Additionally, Muktir's family also liked Manjit as a good girl. Following this, Manjit and Muktir got married in 1997. In the eyes of both families, they were a perfect happy couple who were quite friendly and cheerful. However, just a few years later, when Muktir's true nature was revealed, Manjit faced difficulties in her married life. Muktir belonged to a conservative family, and his thinking was somewhat similar. According to him, Manjit should serve him, and when Muktir returned home from work, there should be delicious food ready on his table. But now, Manjit was quite troubled by Muktir's behavior. She was a woman of strong determination and hard work. She had never imagined Muktir's mindset would be like this. When Manjit told her sisters and friends about the difficulties in her married life, everyone told her that these are just the initial days of her relationship, and there are always some differences or arguments between every new married couple. She just needs to be a little patient. After this, along with Manjit, her sister and Manjit's friends also forgot about this matter. Just as Manjit had planned the rest of her life, she had also planned her pregnancy in a similar way. Now she wanted to become a mother. As a result, 6 years after getting married, her dream also came true in 2003. Manjit gave birth to a daughter whom she named Maya. Manjit was quite happy, and Muktir was also very happy. Now Muktir spent most of his time with Maya. Muktir loved his daughter very much. Because of this, everyone began to feel that perhaps whatever difficulties were coming in Manjit's married life, they had all ended. But this was not true. After Maya's birth, Muktir started drinking even more. Whenever he drank, he would stay out of the house until late at night, and when he came home, he expected his wife to have cooked dinner and be waiting for him. But Manjit, who wanted care and support after pregnancy, was quite broken by her husband's behavior. Because of this, Manjit slipped into depression, and the dreams she had once had were now shattering in front of her eyes. Now she understood how big a mistake she had made in understanding Muktir, and she was not sure what to do to set her health and future in the right direction. During this time, Manjit does not take any major action and remains patiently at Muktir's house for 3 years. However, in 2006, Manjit plans to have a second child, hoping to bring happiness back into the household. Nonetheless, due to constant arguments, she begins to feel that this may no longer be possible. Shortly after, Manjit becomes pregnant again, and Muktir is quite pleased upon learning this news. Unexpectedly, Maddie's behavior changes significantly. He starts to love and care for Manjit as he had before, which makes Manjit very happy as she feels she has regained his lost love. However, she does not realize that this happiness will be short-lived. On October 18, 2006, Manjit had left for her prenatal yoga class, but a significant amount of time passed and she did not return home. The next day, Muktir called Manjit's family and informed them that she hadn't come home since the previous evening. Upon hearing this, Manjit's family became somewhat worried. They then called Manjit's sister, Jasmine, and narrated the whole story. Jasmine also called all of Manjit's friends, but Manjit hadn't gone to any of their houses. In fact, whenever there was an argument between Muktir and Manjit, Manjit often left with her daughter without informing anyone. Sometimes going to a hotel or a friend's house, everyone thought that the same thing had happened again this time, and Manjit would return home shortly. However, this time, Manjit's daughter, Maya, was at home, and this worried everyone a lot because Manjit loved her daughter very much and never left her alone anywhere. It had been a whole day since Manjit had gone missing, so everyone began to suspect that something unfortunate might have happened to her. Therefore, her husband, Muktir, filed a missing person complaint at a nearby police station on the night of October 19th. Apart from this, Muktir also called all the acquaintances to inquire about Manjit, but no one had seen her. By now, the news had spread in the media that a woman named Manjit Pangali had been missing for a few days, and Muktir, Manjit's husband, appealed for her safety and return. During the police investigation, the phone calls of all household members were traced, but the police did not find any significant information. Here too, the date was now October 23rd, 2006, and Manjit had been missing for 5 days. Manjit's husband and family members became worried when the police informed them that a charred body had been found on the shore of a place called South Delta, and they were asked to come and identify it. When Manjit's family members went there to see, they found that the body was indeed Manjit's. Manjit's body was sent for a post-mortem examination, and the report revealed that she was pregnant with a female fetus at the time of her death. This news deeply distressed Manjit's family, who were left to wonder what wrongdoing their daughter had committed that led to her being brutally murdered by being set on fire. From a logical perspective, Manjit's killer not only took her life, but also the life of the child she was carrying in her womb. The post-mortem report also reveals that Manjit's death was not caused by burning, but rather the killer first strangled Manjit and then, when she had stopped breathing, attempted to burn her body. During the investigation, the police also found Manjit's car parked at a distance from her dead body. Forensic examination of the car revealed no signs of forced entry or any marks of struggle inside the car. Subsequently, the police first checked Manjit's background, but didn't find any suspects who had enmity with Manjit. Due to this reason, the police suspected that perhaps the killer was someone who knows Manjit well. Hence the police's direct suspicion falls on Manjit's family members. The police first thought of questioning Manjit's husband Muktir. During the interrogation, Muktir stated that Manjit has been in regular contact with her college friend Tony for the past year, and they sometimes went to dinner together. After Muktir's statement, the police now doubted Tony, and then they searched for and interrogated Tony as well. However, upon talking to Tony, the police found out that Tony didn't have any relationship with Manjit as Muktir had claimed. Tony and Manjit were just good friends, and this fact was confirmed when Tony answered all questions correctly in the lie detector test. Now the police had to determine why Muktir had lied to them. Therefore, the interrogation with Muktir resumed. During this interrogation, the police discovered that there was an individual from the families of Manjit and Muktir who was quite close to both of them. In fact, that person's name was Sikender, and he was Muktir's younger brother. Sikender Pankali used to live in the basement of Manjit and Muktir's house. However, at Manjit's insistence, Muktir had kicked Sikender out of the house. Sikender was the one who used to persuade Muktir to party until late at night and then drink with him. It was because of Sikender's influence that Muktir's habit of drinking alcohol had increased even more. Manjit noticed how Sikender's presence was negatively impacting her life, so she gave her husband Muktir an ultimatum: either Sikender stays or she stays in this house. Muktir faced a difficult choice between supporting his brother or his wife. He decided to ask Sikender to leave and remain with Manjit. After investigating the incident, the police initially suspected Sikender, but could not find any evidence against him. Sikender was able to prove that he was with his friends on the night Manjit disappeared. As a result, the police cleared Sikender of any wrongdoing. However, they later detained Muktir again for further questioning. By now, the police had determined that the relationship between Manjit and Muktir had begun to deteriorate just a few months after their marriage. Whenever Manjit discovered Muktir's daily habit of drinking alcohol, she scolded him. On the other hand, Manjit had hurt Muktir's brother Sikender by throwing him out of the house, which had wounded Muktir's ego and masculinity, causing him to harbor even more resentment towards Manjit. However, despite this, there was no solid evidence to make Muktir the prime suspect in Manjit's murder case. Moreover, Manjit's family and friends also had substantial trust in him. But now the police have decided to re-examine all the evidence. First, the police noticed that the driver's seat of the car was pushed back, which indicated that Manjit had not driven the car there by herself. Rather, there was someone else with her in the car at the time. Secondly, Muktir had mentioned the location of Manjit's prenatal classes in his statement, and the car was parked near that area. However, during the investigation, it was found that there were no prenatal yoga classes in that area, and the actual location where Manjit used to attend her prenatal classes was approximately 15 miles away from the location provided by Muktir. Consequently, Muktir's lie was caught. In simple words, Muktir told the police that Manjit's prenatal yoga class location was where her dead body was found. But in reality, Manjit's prenatal classes were far away from that place. After that, the police tracked Muktir's phone's location and call records. Here, the police discovered that Muktir had Manjit's cell phone, in which he had inserted his own SIM and was using it. This revealed to the police that on the evening of October 18th, Manjit had visited Mukti's house. Therefore, Muktir had Manjit's cell phone. By now, all the statements given by Muktir were proving to be false. Then, the police got solid evidence in their hands. They obtained CCTV footage from a gas station near Manjit's house, in which Muktir was seen buying an old newspaper and a lighter from that gas station. Although Muktir used to drink alcohol, he did not smoke cigarettes. So why would he buy a lighter and an old newspaper? Here, Muktir became a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. So the police took immediate action. Nearly 6 months later, on March 12, 2006, Muktir was arrested in his wife Manjit's murder case. The police interrogated Muktir rigorously. At first, he completely denied the claim of murdering Manjit, portraying himself as innocent. But then, after some time, his courage broke and he confessed to his crime. Now the culprit was caught. When Muktir explained why he had mercilessly killed his pregnant wife on October 18th, the police were shaken to the core. Muktir explained that after Manjit's yoga class, he took her home, where an argument broke out between them. The argument escalated to the point that, in a fit of rage, Muktir strangled Manjit, killing her. He then took her body to a secluded seaside location in South Delta and burned it in an attempt to destroy any evidence that could be used by the police. In addition, Muktir provided the reason behind wanting to kill Manjit. Essentially, Muktir had developed hatred towards Manjit. Muktir's mind was filled with intense dislike and negativity towards Manjit, which became the cause of Manjit's death. Hearing this, both Manjit's and Muktir's families and friends were greatly surprised. Subsequently, in November 2010, Muktir was found guilty in the Manjit murder case, and he was also charged with second-degree murder. It was a shocking murder that sent shockwaves across the province. Former school teacher Muktir Pangali strangled his pregnant wife and then burned her body. Immediately after Muktir's arrest, both Manjit's and Muktir's families fought a case in court for the full custody of Muktir's 3-year-old daughter, Maya. However, in the end, Maya's full custody was awarded to Manjit's sister, Jasmine Bambra. Then, in February 2011, Muktir was sentenced to life imprisonment. Crown Prosecutor Dennis Murray narrated the incident in the following manner. Immediately after the verdict of the Manjit murder case, Muktir killed Manjit immediately after she returned from prenatal yoga classes. Then he took her body to a secluded coastal area in South Delta in Manjit's own car and set it on fire. He delayed filing a missing complaint as much as possible. In December 2010, the Canadian police publicly disclosed Manjit's diary and letters. After this, several media houses extensively scrutinized these letters, revealing that Manjit was clinically depressed. However, she was making a lot of effort to save her married life. During discussions with media houses, a member of Manjit's family revealed that she had been struggling with depression since her first pregnancy. Muktir not only killed Manjit, but also took 2 lives. She was so happy to be pregnant. It was something that she had wanted for a long time. So with that, the Manjit Pangali murder case comes to an end. Every day, hundreds of thousands of individuals go missing worldwide. Although many are quickly found or return on their own, about a third are discovered deceased eventually. The remainder disappear without a trace, their fates enshrouded in mystery. Mysterious and unsolved cases of disappearances frequently captivate the public and become the basis for detective novels or fantasy films. Yet, sometimes reality can be more terrifying than fiction. The disappearance of 19-year-old student Katie Poir stands out as particularly unique. Her case was so baffling that even NASA experts participated in the effort to find her. Despite their best efforts, she could not be found alive. This shocking event deeply affected the nation, especially the normally peaceful town of Moose Lake, where Katie resided along with other students. Katie Elizabeth Poir was born on February 28, 1980, in the quaint town of Duluth in St. Louis County, Minnesota. She was the second child in a loving and ordinary family. She grew up with her older brother, and they shared a strong bond since childhood. When Katie started school, the family relocated to Carleton County and settled in Barnum. Katie was known for being sociable, active, and highly creative. She studied vocals, played guitar, and eventually began performing in a music band, where she happily showcased her talents. Katie also had a deep love for animals. She volunteered at a shelter for stray cats and dogs and participated actively in cleaning and beautifying local parks. Her beauty was well recognized. In high school, she even participated in a city beauty contest, where she achieved second place. After high school graduation, she attended college and moved to Moose Lake, a quiet and picturesque town in the same county as her family. By that time, Katie had been dating Mark for a couple of years. They both went to university and planned to get married. The couple rented a small but cozy apartment in a good neighborhood. Katie attended law school to study criminal law, while her fiancé focused on computer technology. They both worked part-time jobs to support themselves financially, save for their wedding, and avoid relying on their parents. Katie secured a job at a gas station near a busy highway, where she took night shifts several times a week. She enjoyed this work because it allowed her to manage her schedule efficiently. However, her parents were concerned about her safety, since she was alone at the shop during nighttime along the highway, connecting several large cities. A place bustling with traffic around the clock, with various people visiting the gas station and store. Despite their concerns, Katie reassured them that there was no need for worry due to surveillance cameras everywhere and the presence of a nearby popular diner that remained crowded most of the time. On May 26, 1999, 19-year-old Katie Puya went to the store for her regular shift. It appeared to be an ordinary day. She switched with her colleague who had worked during the day and took up her position behind the cash register. Around midnight, a woman came by the gas station, filled her tank with gasoline, and walked into the store to pay and buy some snacks. After gathering her items, she approached the cash register but found it unattended. Confused, she waited for a while, then went to the utility room and called out. There was no answer. This felt strange since the store was fully operational, lights on, doors unlocked. When no clerk appeared after 10 minutes, she decided to contact the police. Police arrived promptly, examined the store and its surroundings, but found nothing unusual or alarming. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood traces. Everything was in place, including a good amount of money in the cash register. Robbery was ruled out immediately. Initially, it was assumed that Katie might have left voluntarily due to an urgent matter. However, all her personal belongings were still in the store, keys to her house and car included. Her vehicle was parked outside. This posed a question. How did Katie leave? On foot. Abandoning her car and purse seemed unlikely, pointing towards a more troubling scenario. The police reached out to Katie's parents to report her disappearance and inquire if they had any clues about her whereabouts or any reasons she might have abruptly left. Mr. and Mrs. Puya assured them that Katie was always responsible and would not abandon her duties as she highly valued her job. Katie's fiancé corroborated their statements, expressing his utter confusion regarding her sudden disappearance. At this point, Katie Puya was officially reported missing and the store treated as a potential crime scene. The investigation kicked off with a review of footage from 4 surveillance cameras installed in the store, each one positioned strategically to cover every angle inside. The initial hours of Katie's shift revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing suspicious occurred during those early hours. Around 11 p.m., a girl walked into the store. She chatted with Katie for about 10 minutes but didn't purchase anything. From their conversation, it was clear that she was either an acquaintance or friend of the missing student. Approximately half an hour later, they entered the store. He looked around but quickly left. Shortly after, he came back in. At the moment, Katie had gone to the back room, and it seemed he might have been observing her from outside through the glass door. He re-entered the store and headed directly towards the back room. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in that section of the store, so what happened next is unclear. A few minutes later, Katie and this unknown man emerged from the back room together and moved toward the exit. The man was walking behind Katie, holding her by the hair with one hand and pressing his other hand against her back. It was evident that he was threatening her with a weapon, likely a knife or gun, and forcing her to leave with him. Essentially, this constituted an abduction from her workplace. This information was crucial. However, further investigation faced challenges because there were no cameras at the gas station adjacent to the store or in its parking lot. Consequently, determining where the suspect took Katie, his vehicle details, and his direction of travel was impossible. Given that the gas station and store were situated on an isolated stretch near a busy highway with no places to hide or go except along the road, it's likely someone would have seen if he had forcefully led her away on foot and contacted law enforcement. Therefore, it's presumed that he took her to the parking lot and placed her in his car. Another problem arose from the poor quality of the video footage from existing cameras. It was 1999 after all, and having any cameras at all back then was quite fortunate. The videos were grainy black and white images that rendered identifying features unclear, making it difficult to create a facial composite swiftly. Law enforcement and volunteers who joined the search scoured several miles around the gas station and store looking for possible clues, but found nothing conclusive. Investigators also interviewed Melinda, the sole witness who spoke with Katie shortly before she vanished. Melinda confirmed she was a close friend and fellow student working part-time at a nearby diner. She mentioned seeing a suspicious man harassing both a customer inside the diner and another woman in the parking lot earlier on, suggesting to each woman that they should get better acquainted. Both declined his suggestions and walked away separately. Melinda's work shift ended at 11 p.m. As she locked the door and prepared to go home, a man showed up again. He approached, asking if the restaurant was closing and what time it would open in the morning. Melinda found his question odd and hurried to inform Katie about the visitor, suggesting they call the police. Katie, however, reassured her that everything was fine since the store had plenty of cameras. Melinda then remembered the man drove a black Ford F-150 pickup truck. They left the parking lot around the same time, but he overtook her quickly. She recalled part of his license plate, 5 and 57, and the letter Y. This was an important clue, but in the late 90s, without a national electronic database, locating the vehicle took time. Both Melinda and another witness at a gas station provided only rough descriptions of the suspect. Given it was dark outside, they couldn't get a clear look at him. They described him as a white male with long blonde hair, aged between 35 and 40. He spoke without an accent and wore a baseball cap that partially hid his face. The surveillance videos were not much help either due to low resolution. For the first time, police sought help from NASA specialists to enhance image quality and reveal more details of the suspect's face. Using advanced technology meant for astronomical purposes, they reconstructed a clearer image of him. The task was complicated, strange angles, as he never looked directly at any camera in the footage. Still, authorities were satisfied with the final composite portrait. This portrait was distributed to police stations statewide and frequently shown on news channels. Citizens were urged to stay vigilant and report any sightings of individuals matching this description or driving a similar vehicle. Soon after, police began receiving dozens of calls daily, though most turned out to be false leads. About a couple of days later, authorities detained a 25-year-old man who bore a strong resemblance to the individual of the composite portrait. Additionally, he had a prior criminal record for robbery and harassment. However, he was soon released due to a notable distinguishing feature, a large tattoo covering his entire arm, which the suspect in the video did not have. An important detail was that the man who escorted Katie out of the store wore a Yankee baseball team t-shirt with the number 23. According to Melinda, when the suspect approached her in the parking lot, he was dressed differently. Yet, upon reviewing the surveillance footage, she had no doubt it was him. A week later, a call came from Minneapolis. A worried man reported that the person in the portrait looked like his neighbor, who worked as a cleaner and drove a similar car. A couple of weeks ago, right around the time of the girl's abduction, this neighbor unexpectedly cut his long blonde hair and began growing a beard. This suspect turned out to be 50-year-old Donald Hutchinson. It was discovered that he had recently quit his job without any apparent reason, which raised suspicions. On the day of Katie's disappearance and the following day, he didn't go to work because he reported not feeling well. Former colleagues confirmed that he drove a black Ford F-150 with a license plate matching what police were looking for. Donald Aubin Hutchinson's real name is Donald Allen Blom. He was born in Minnesota in 1949 and grew up in a dysfunctional family where his father was an alcoholic who abused both him and his mother. As a teenager, Donald himself started drinking and displayed uncontrollable aggressive behavior that troubled everyone around him. Consequently, he was transferred to a special school for difficult children. At age 25, Blom was convicted and imprisoned after kidnapping and assaulting a 14-year-old girl. However, he served only 3 years before being released on parole. Shortly after, he was arrested again for assault and harassment, but received another short sentence. In 1983, Donald was arrested yet again. This time, he had kidnapped 2 teenage girls, taken them to a deserted area, and tied them to a tree. He assaulted one of the girls and strangled the other several times, then revived her, making it a game of life and death. Fortunately, a passerby walking with a dog heard their screams and saved them. Consequently, Blom served 9 years in prison. Upon his release, he changed his name, moved to another city, and avoided police attention for a long time. He got married after his release, and his wife bore him 4 children. On the surface, their family appeared happy. The man secured employment. However, his addiction to alcohol and substances turned him into a menace. His wife and children often suffered from his violence, but occasionally this monster sought other victims. Nobody was aware of Donald's criminal past. He went to great lengths to conceal it by changing his name and identity. He even altered his appearance by growing long hair and a beard that he sometimes shaved off. Initially, the police lacked solid grounds to detain him. They could only question him during their investigation. The suspect owned around 20 acres of land just 12 miles from the store where Katie was kidnapped. In fact, right after Katie's disappearance, the police had already visited him upon learning about his black pickup truck. Donald claimed that he had sold the vehicle and that its license plate differed from the one they sought. He even provided a document as proof, which later turned out to be fake. Following these findings, the police secured a search warrant for his house and land property. They discovered an unexpected surprise in a large barn, where Donald attempted to hide his black Ford F-150 behind old junk and furniture. The license plate matched the one identified by Melinda. With this discovery, Donald's calm facade began to crack. Nonetheless, he continued denying any involvement in Katie's disappearance. Yet even with this significant lead, the pickup truck, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him at that point. The suspect's license plate was only a partial match, and there were neither witnesses nor video evidence confirming that Katie had been taken in that specific car. Consequently, the police shifted their focus to searching the house, aiming to find traces of the missing girl or even Katie herself. The interior was spotless, no blood traces, no signs of forcible confinement, and no clues linked to Katie's disappearance were found. However, inspecting the property posed challenges as it spanned over 24 acres and required more than a day's effort along with significant resources. To address this, National Guard personnel and hundreds of volunteers joined in the search and investigation efforts. The first day yielded no results. By the end of the second day, however, police stumbled upon peculiar ashes suggesting that something had been burned or cremated over an extended period. Among these ashes were bone fragments, which criminologists meticulously collected and sent to a laboratory for analysis. While most bones were animal remains, parts of a human skeleton were also discovered, including a tooth that warranted closer examination. Experts identified that the bones belonged to a young woman aged between 18 and 23 years old. However, DNA testing faced complications because prolonged exposure to high temperatures had destroyed much of the material. When criminologists from other states joined the investigation, they managed to extract a DNA fragment matching the DNA of the missing girl. Unfortunately, this crucial evidence was deemed only indirect and could not conclusively establish the suspect's guilt. Hence, it became imperative to analyze the tooth found among the ashes to determine if it belonged to Katie. It was revealed that this tooth contained a rare filling made of silicone and zirconium, an innovative dental material. Conversations with Katie's dentist confirmed this unusual filling. He immediately recognized his work, since he had used materials obtained from an international dental conference on her just a week before she vanished. Though all collected evidence remained circumstantial, collectively, a combination strong enough, it sufficed for law enforcement officials to arrest Donald and detain him until trial proceedings concluded. Thus unfolded developments leading up to his incarceration, pending further proceedings. On June 22, 1999, the man immediately pleaded not guilty, sought legal counsel, and expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation, prove his innocence. During a more thorough examination of his belongings, law enforcement discovered multiple firearms for which he lacked permits. Shortly thereafter, Donald began confessing. He admitted to kidnapping Katie from the store, bringing her to his property where he strangled her, and subsequently burning her body. However, he denied any coercion related to intimacy with the victim, attributing his inability to do so to the significant amount of alcohol and illegal substances he had consumed. Donald further claimed that he used only firewood and paper to incinerate the remains, but experts asserted that this method alone wouldn't suffice without additional fuel. That evening was marked by aimless driving around the neighborhood. Upon noticing Melinda at a gas station, Donald initially intended to follow her when she left, but then changed his mind. He overtook her and proceeded home to change clothes before heading back to the store where Katie worked. This accounts for discrepancies in eyewitness testimony regarding what he was wearing. 2 weeks later, Donald unexpectedly recanted his confession, asserting his innocence once again. He alleged that he had been coerced into confessing due to threats made against him and his wife. His wife attempted to support this claim during the trial by offering an alibi, asserting that he was at home with her throughout that evening and did not leave the residence. In a striking turn of events during the trial, 2 former victims from 1983 came forward. They testified about their experiences with Donald, depicting him as a ruthless sadist who had subjected them to torture and exploitation. The evidence presented along with the witness statements led the jury to unanimously declare the defendant guilty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of. Subsequently, Donald's wife admitted she lived in fear of her husband, habitually beat her and their children. She expressed that she felt compelled to provide him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. After disclosing, she changed her last name, took their children, and moved to another state where they wouldn't be known. On a related note, detectives working on this high-profile case suspected that Blum could be a serial rapist and murderer. They linked him to several unsolved crimes involving the disappearance of young girls under similar circumstances. Specifically, he was suspected in the strangling of Wilma Johnson, found in 1983, as well as the 1993 abduction and murder of student Holly Spangler. In 2021, Blum was transferred to a medium-security prison at MCF Faribault. Conditions there were much more lenient, and he referred to it as a vacation. However, after complaints and protests from Katie's family, Blum was moved back to a high-security facility in Stillwater, Minnesota. He passed away there on January 10, 2023, at age 73. Katie Pierce's death has been covered extensively in popular television documentaries about real crimes. HLN Channel aired a series called Forensic Files, which featured an episode titled Tooth or Consequences, based on Katie's story. The Discovery Channel released an episode from their series New Detectives titled Fatal Abduction, dedicated to this particular case. Additionally, in 2010,